Chapter 861. When the fire appeared, it borrowed the strength of the wind. When it came into contact with the oil in the air and on the ground, the fire began to spread at a very fast speed. In many places, the fire was connected to one another. It looked like it was going to spread to the entire city and could not be contained. Such a conflagration was fatal to the Tatar horsemen in the city. When the fire was everywhere, the first to be frightened were the war horses that were still in the stables. Animals were afraid of fire. When the fire came at them, even the docile war horses could not endure it. They had no choice but to fiercely neigh. Their bodies surged, and they forcefully jumped out of the wooden stakes and galloped on the streets. When they encountered the Tatar soldiers, they didn't listen to their advice and continued to charge forward. Even if they knocked the soldiers who blocked their way to the ground, they still couldn't stop the momentum of their charge. The neighing of war horses could be heard everywhere. When the fire gradually grew bigger and started to connect together, some soldiers could not avoid being surrounded by the fire. Then, extremely miserable screams rang out. The entire city was thrown into chaos in an instant. The soldiers on the city gate tower were relatively lucky. No wooden barrels fell on them. But just because they were fine, it did not mean that they were fine. When they saw the fire devouring their war horses, their companions, and even the entire city, some of them could not help but cry out. This is the punishment of the gods for making an enemy out of the mercenaries. Ah, this is heavenly punishment. We cannot control it. Brothers, let us surrender and lessen the wrath of the gods. We surrender. We are willing to atone for our sins. When the voices were heard, more and more Tatar soldiers knelt on the ground and cried out. There were even some who rushed down the city walls. They wanted to open the city gates and rush to the foot of the mercenaries to repent and atone for their sins with actions. Bastards, what are you doing? You are not allowed to open the city gates and you are not allowed to surrender? Men, kill all those who have lost their minds. Kill them all. Seeing that the situation was in chaos and that the soldiers on the city walls were not listening to their general's orders, Hubo-Er's face was ashen. As the shouts rang out, some of the soldiers who were still clear-headed rushed to the side of the inner city gate with their blades. When they faced their companions who had already gone mad, they first tried to dissuade them, but when it was useless, they swung their blades and cut them down. However, the number of personal guards was still too few, while the number of soldiers who had gone crazy was too many. It had already become a general trend, and there was no way to stop it. Seeing that the situation was getting out of hand, Mu Ran, Hu Lin, Gao Er and the other generals brought their soldiers and rushed in front of Hubo-Er. General, this is the will of the heavens. We cannot go against it. Please retreat. Hubo-Er didn't want to admit defeat, but he didn't have any other choice. In the end, he spat out a word with great difficulty. Retreat! Hubo-Er knew that there was nothing they could do about it. They could only rush out of the city and wait for a chance to make a comeback. Before leaving the city, he did not forget about General Chiga and the 10,000 Tatar cavalrymen who were attacking the city at Xuanfu City. Quick! Send a horse to inform General Chiga to retreat as soon as possible. Hubo-Er gathered his personal guards and around 5,000 Tatar cavalry, making a total of 6,000 people. When the surrendered soldiers opened the city gates, Hubo-Er led his soldiers out. The new soldiers waiting at the city gates had already woken up from their initial shock. Under the orders of the battalion commander, company commander, and platoon commander, they all got on their horses and prepared for battle. When they saw the raging fire in the city, countless grassland warriors were shocked. At the same time, they thought that the god of war was indeed a messenger sent by the immortal heaven. Even the heavens were willing to help him. They really didn't know who else could be his opponent. The city was ablaze, and the gates outside the city were wide open. Then countless Tatar cavalry rushed out. As soon as they appeared, they charged over in a frenzy. It seemed that they wanted to fight to the death with the mercenaries. Blow the bugle call. Kill the enemy. Tiger's Mane saw that the situation was set, so he opened his mouth and gave the order to attack. The high-spirited and high-spirited mercenary soldiers immediately swarmed forward in units of battalions. They launched a deadly attack at the remnants of the Tatar cavalry that had charged out. The cavalry of both sides soon clashed within 2 miles of the city gates. The new army, which had the upper hand in both strength and morale, pierced through the enemy cavalry formation after just a few exchanges, causing the enemy to throw away their armor and flee in utter defeat. "General, let's go. I'll cover the rear," Gore called out, and then he led his personal guards and the 1,000 or so Tatar cavalry to form a human wall, blocking Hubo and the others from escaping. In the current situation, it was clearly impossible for all of them to escape. Only a portion of them might still have a chance. Gao stayed behind of his own accord, causing tears to well up in Hubo's eyes. He knew what would happen if he made this decision, but he didn't have any other choice. "Let's go." After a moment of hesitation, Hubo whipped his horse. Under the protection of Mu Ren, Hu Lin, and several hundred personal guards, they finally broke out of the encirclement of the new army and headed southwest. General Gao, who was left behind with over 1,000 cavalry, was only able to hold out for less than an hour before they were completely annihilated. Among them, Gao was slain by over a dozen blades, thus announcing the great defeat of the Tatar cavalry and the glorious victory of the new army. In this battle, the great fire in the city had killed more than 1,000 Tatar soldiers, injured more than 2,000, and killed 3,000 enemy cavalry. Hubo fled with a few generals and 500 cavalry. The threat of the Tatar cavalry had disappeared, and they fled in defeat. "Clean up the battlefield and make preparations. There's still a big fish coming." Seeing that the sun was setting, Tiger's Mane ordered the cooks to cook while ordering the army to take turns to rest and prepare for the upcoming battle. On the walls of the Xuanfu city, Shi Wanshan was in a corner of the city gate tower, facing Dengchong, Ancient River, and Ning Wenfeng. He had already informed the 3 of Yukan's arrival during the day, but the 4 of them had discussed it for a long time without coming to a conclusion. They all had the same question. How did Yukan find out about the news outside with the 4 gates of the Xuanfu city closed? After the incident at Tulu City, Ning Wenfeng had increased the patrols in the city. Even a bird would be discovered if it flew into the city. However, they had not received any reports. So where did the news come from? There was also another question. Why did Yukan say that the Tatar cavalry would retreat? Would they really be so obedient and retreat? Since they could not think of a reason, they decided not to think about it. The 4 of them had already arrived at the city gate tower. They ate and drank here, waiting for the situation to change. A pair of chopsticks picked up a mouthful of food. Gu He, who had just recovered from his injuries, put it into his mouth and said, "Commander, do you think we've been played by that Yukan guy?" He suddenly gathered the entire army. "If the news is false, wouldn't we have wasted our efforts?" That's right. If this incident were to be reported to the court by someone with ulterior motives, who knows how many people would impeach us? The eunuch, Deng Chong, also nodded in agreement. He did not care if the soldiers were tired or how many soldiers died. He only cared about one thing, and that was how the court viewed them. This would directly affect the emperor's attitude towards him and his future. Hearing the questioning voices of the 2, Shi Wanshan said with a heavy expression, "To be honest, I don't know how much of Yukan's words are true. However, since he was willing to bet his life, it should not be false." "Oh right, did Yukan come?" "He's here." The one who answered him was the commander, Ning Wenfeng. "He came as soon as the sky turned dark. He found that my people were watching his every move. If the news this time is false, he definitely won't be able to live." "Good." Shi Wanshan nodded. "Since he dares to gamble with his life, what harm is there in playing with him? Let's wait. At the latest, we'll know before daybreak tomorrow." Shi Wanshan gave the deadline for daybreak. However, they did not wait until midnight. The Tatar cavalry below the city walls began to move. General Chiga had already received the fast horse scouts sent by Hubo and learned of the fire in Tulu City. With their retreat cut off, there would be no more reinforcements or food. They might even have to face the appearance of mercenaries. When that time came, they would be attacked from both sides and would definitely lose. At this moment, there seemed to be no other choice but to retreat. Pass down my orders. Move out one by one. Try not to make any noise, especially not to alarm Baiming's army. Chiga summoned his generals and gave them the order to retreat. However, he was careful not to mention Hu Bo-er's defeat. He only said that General Chiga was going to fight a decisive battle with the mercenaries and did not have enough troops. The Tatar cavalry, who were not adept at sieges, had long grown tired of Xuanfu City. Now that they had a chance to leave this place, naturally no one objected. All of them happily agreed and began to retreat according to the plan. The Tatar army had been very careful with their retreat. Normally, they would have been able to retreat without being discovered in the middle of the night. However, things were different now. They had already sent out dozens of scouts to keep an eye on them. The moment they moved, the news was immediately sent to Shi Wanshan. They really moved? Hearing the scouts' report, Shi Wanshan's face was filled with astonishment. Deng Chong and the others were also shocked. Their expressions were written all over their faces. Chapter 862. How did you can obtain such information? If they didn't figure this out, wouldn't it mean that their every move under the sun was being watched by others? How could there be any secrets? Why don't we send someone to capture you can and use some methods? I don't believe that he won't talk. Ancient River said with a ferocious face. Clearly, he also felt the threat. No. Ning Wenfeng shook his head and rejected. Yukan should be one of the Duke of Loyalty without a doubt, and it's hard to guarantee that there's a second Yukan beside us. If we touch him like this, once the news spreads, the Duke of Loyalty will punish us for treating our benefactor like this. If because of this, Tulu City won't be given to us and even attracted the mercenary army to become our enemy, the consequences are not something we can bear. At that time, even if we die, we will be regarded as sinners and our families will suffer. Ancient River originally wanted to say something, but he suddenly realized that he had nothing to say. That's right, we can't touch you can. Not only can we not touch him, we have to treat him well. Eunuch Deng Chong also expressed his attitude. He didn't care if he was being targeted or not. What he wanted was to win the battle and take back Tulu City. This way, he would have an explanation to the emperor. Even if things were settled, he would definitely leave this place one day. Why should he anger the Duke of Loyalty? Wouldn't that be looking for trouble? Since the two of them didn't support touching Yukan, Ancient River knew that his suggestion had failed. He simply changed the topic and said, "Since the Tatar army has really started to retreat, when will we attack?" Half an hour later. Let's wait for some of them to leave first. Since they are so weak, it will be the best time for us to make a move. When we make our move, we will spread the news of Tulu City's defeat and disrupt their morale. Shi Wanshan finally opened his mouth and decided the matter. Although he didn't know why the Tatar cavalry retreated, he thought that it must be related to the situation in Tulu City. It must be because the situation there was critical that they had to retreat. Since that was the case, he naturally had to add fuel to the fire. He wasn't naive enough to think that the Tatar general would tell the soldiers the truth. Alright, if you don't want to talk about it, I'll talk about it. Okay. Shi Wanshan's decision was supported by the other three. Immediately, everyone went to arrange the troops to make the final preparations before the surprise attack. At around 2 in the morning, under General Chiga's arrangements, the 5,000 Tatar cavalry had retreated far away, and the 10,000 cavalry were also preparing to break camp and retreat. In comparison, among the remaining 10,000 cavalrymen, there were 3,000 who were injured. Chi Gu had deliberately arranged for these people to be the last. His intention was very obvious. Once the Northern Ming army discovered the fact that they had retreated, if they sent troops to chase after them, these 3,000 people would be left as the rear guard. After all, they were all injured. Fighting to the death on the battlefield would be the greatest expression of their value. However, Chi Gu had never expected that his every move would be discovered by the Baiming army. Before he could arrange for more people to retreat, the gates of Xuanfu City suddenly opened, and tens of thousands of Baiming army soldiers charged out. At the very front was the 3,000 cavalrymen led by General Ancient River. This was a new group of cavalrymen made up of old soldiers and new recruits. As soon as they appeared, They held torches and shouted loudly, saying that Tulu city had been occupied by the mercenaries, and that the Tatar army had lost, so they charged out and caught Chiga off guard. Seeing the countless torches appear, and seeing that the army was in chaos, Chiga gritted his teeth and made a ruthless decision. Retreat! Retreat as much as you can. With that, he led the 2,000 cavalrymen to retreat. After Chiga escaped, the remaining Tatar army became a group of people without a leader. Facing the pursuit of the Baiming army, they only put up a symbolic resistance, and then they either surrendered or knelt on the ground, becoming captives of the Baiming army. It was only a charge, but they actually obtained 7,000 captives. Shi Huanshan was naturally overjoyed. This was definitely a great victory, and once this was reported to the emperor, he would definitely be promoted. Haha! Good, good. Eunuch Deng Chang's joy and anger were written all over his face. His smile was so wide that it could squeeze millions of mosquitoes and flies to death. Eunuch Deng Wenfeng, I'll leave this place to you. I'll continue to pursue the enemy with General Ancient River and strive to obtain more and take back Tulu city. Shi Huanshan rode his horse to Deng Chang and Ning Wenfeng's side and said in a hurried tone, Good, good. General Shi, go ahead. Leave this place to me. Deng Chang, who was already so happy that he couldn't tell north from south, naturally agreed. Immediately, Shi Huanshan led the main force under his banner and began to pursue the enemy through the night. Because most of his troops were infantrymen, their speed was limited. The ones that could really play a role were the 3,000 cavalrymen led by Ancient River. However, these 3,000 cavalrymen were also attacked by the Tatar cavalry along the way. This was the gift Chiga had left for the Baiming army. At this moment, the first group of 5,000 cavalrymen from the Shen mansion finally arrived at the foot of Tulu city. The city before them had already been scorched by fire. The 5,000 cavalrymen couldn't believe that this was the city they had left not long ago. But what was even more unexpected was that after the bugle call to charge, many mercenaries suddenly appeared all around them. They split into several directions and surrounded the cavalrymen. Under a direct attack, the panicked Tatar cavalry announced that their battle formation had collapsed. Apart from less than 1,000 men who managed to charge out, the rest were either killed or captured. The new army had once again performed a meritorious service. Quickly clean up the battlefield. There will be more enemies coming. Commander Tiger's Mane commanded the army to collect the enemy corpses and draw in the horses in an orderly manner. The Falcon Regiment's actions were truly extraordinary. Not only did they burn down Tulu city, they also greatly raised the morale of the new army. Who didn't know that even God was willing to help the war god? For the grassland warriors who were deeply superstitious, this would make them believe that Yang Chendong was Changtian's messenger even more. This would play an immeasurable role in rallying the morale of the army. About 4 to 6 hours later, in the afternoon, Chiga, who was leading 1,000 Tatar cavalry that had fled in a sorry state, appeared. As soon as he entered the city, he saw the dilapidated city and the countless mercenary cavalrymen in front of him. He knew that it was impossible for him to escape this place alive. Chiga, Huboer has already escaped. The 5,000 cavalrymen you sent out have also been captured. There is only one path before you. Surrender or you will be spared. If you don't surrender, you will die. Deputy Commander Shibi rode on his horse and appeared in front of the new army. You want to persuade me to surrender? Chiga looked at Shibi, who was half Mongol, with an inexplicable look in his eyes. Just like how the mercenaries wanted to understand the situation of the Tatar cavalrymen, they also wanted to understand the situation of the new army. As the deputy commander, Shibi was naturally the target of their research. This person was actually a former general of the Tatar army, and one who had surrendered. It was hard to understand how such a person could be used by the war god, and even be promoted to such a high position. It was impossible to say that Chiga did not have any envy and jealousy in his heart. However, he would not choose to walk down the same path. Perhaps this was because people had different lives, or perhaps it was because the world was so wonderful. There had to be different choices to lead a different life. That's right, I want to persuade you to surrender. Speaking of which, General Chiga is also a talent. He's been in the Tatar army for too long. If you can work for the war god, I can guarantee you a high position and a good salary. How about it? At the same time, these words were undoubtedly more realistic when spoken by someone who had personally experienced it. However, not everyone was willing to surrender. Chiga's character was one of those who would rather break than bend. Perhaps his ability was limited, or perhaps his personal strength was average, but his character was still very stubborn. Shibi, don't think that just because you surrendered to the Han people we are all soft. Let me tell you, if you want to persuade me to surrender, there is no way. If you have the ability, then come and kill me. Otherwise, just wait for me to kill you. Heis. A sigh sounded, and it was because of Chiga's actions. Then, Shibi slowly raised his right hand and slammed it down. On both sides of him, countless cavalrymen in green rushed forward. Kill! Chiga also roared, and led 1,000 cavalrymen to meet the enemy head-on. However, whether it was the morale of the troops or the numbers, the Tatar cavalrymen who were at a disadvantage only lasted for an hour before collapsing. Then, they were surrounded, and those who would rather die than surrender would be killed. Surrendering would allow them to live. For hours later, more than 2,000 cavalrymen came from the direction of the Shen mansion. It was Ancient River's army. They chased the enemy all the way from the Shen mansion to Tulu City, but they were still a step too late. When they arrived, they saw the already dead Chiga and the mercenaries cleaning up the battlefield. That's it. Ancient River, who was at the front of the cavalry, saw that the battle was over and was shocked. As far as he knew, there were no less than 6,000 Tatar cavalrymen who escaped from the Shen mansion. How could they be dealt with so quickly? General Gu, right? I am the new deputy commander of the army, Shibi. I have been waiting for you for a long time under the orders of the commander. This is Tulu City, and it is now officially in your hands. I hope you don't lose it. We are not willing to help you take it back every time. Shibi, who had followed Yang Qindong to the Shen Manor, stood out once again. After greeting Gu he didn't wait for the other party to say anything before leading the army and leaving. In the entire city, other than the charred and black charcoal, there were also the corpses of the Tatar cavalry that had been placed neatly on the ground. Chiga's corpse was also among them. Chapter 863. This was a greeting gift from the new army to the Baiming army on the orders of the 6th young master, or perhaps to Shi Wanshan. It was an extremely obvious gesture of goodwill, and the supply convoys of the mercenaries would be able to pass through unimpeded. Not long after, Shi Wanshan returned to Tulu and accepted this favor. He had the heads of the new army sent back to the capital of Baiming. The news of the victory at the Shen mansion, the deaths of more than 10,000 enemies, the capture of more than 10,000, and the recovery of Tulu spread throughout the capital of Baiming. The Daizong was overjoyed and made Shi Wanshan the commander of the Shen mansion army, as well as the commander of the all-encompassing capital. Some people who knew the inside story even released the news that as long as Shi Wanshan could make a new contribution, it was not impossible for him to be conferred the title of Earl. The Great Ming dynasty had always had a saying that one could not be granted a title without military merit. Shi Wanshan's victory over the Tatar cavalry was equivalent to giving face to the Baiming imperial court. If not for the fact that his seniority was still shallow, he would have been able to obtain the title of count. Receiving the title of commander meant that in the entire Shen Manor, Shi Wanshan had become the one and only highest official. He was both excited and grateful. All of this had been done for him by the Duke of Loyal and Courageous, and he had to accept this favor. In the recently tidied Tulu Yamen, a guard half-kneeled in front of Shi Wanshan. Reporting. Yukan has come and said that he wishes to take his leave. Please invite Sir Yu. Reality had already proven Yukan's identity. Although it was still a mystery how he had learned of the situation outside, Wang Chong had no intention of pursuing the matter. Now was the honeymoon period between him and Yang Qindong. He would not let such a trivial matter cast a shadow on the relationship between him and Yang Qindong. Yukan had come alone, a bundle on his back, just like when he had left Tulu to follow the Baiming army to the Shen mansion. Mr. Yu, are you leaving? Looking at his attire, Shi Wanshan immediately thought of something. Yukan's identity had been exposed. Given their current relationship, even if he stayed in Tulu City, no one would dare to do anything to him. However, vigilance was unavoidable. If that was the case, how could they carry out their work? Thus, Yukan's departure became inevitable. Yes, Kan is here to bid farewell to the commander. I believe you must have a message for the loyalty duke. Yukan's expression was very calm as he spoke. About 2 hours later, Yukan left. His face was still as calm as before, making it impossible for others to see what he was thinking. Then, he rode out of the city and headed straight for the first city. It was already 2 days later when Yukan reappeared in the beginning city. He met the Security Bureau's director, Feng Liang, who was stationed in the beginning city. Haha, you're back. Well, you did a good job this time. Even the 6th young master praised you. Let's go. Since you're back, let's go see the 6th young master. He still has something for you to do. Feng Liang laughed and pulled Yukan's hand as they walked towards the Yang mansion. In the Yang mansion, the new army had withdrawn. They returned with a great victory in this battle, and a total of more than 20,000 captives had been sent to the logistics team. They were being screened and sorted out. It had to be said that the physical fitness of the Tatar soldiers was still very good. After a preliminary understanding, it was possible that 80% of them could continue to stay and join the army. This was already a very high proportion. As the Logistics Division's division commander, Beta Persei was standing beside Yang Qindong with a smile. The more captives and able-bodied men the Logistics Division had, the more confident he would be in doing things. Looking at Beta Persei's smiling face, Yang Qindong was too lazy to correct him. Speaking of which, the longer Beta Persei followed him, the more appropriate he would be in doing things. Could be said that Yang Qindong did not have to worry about him. Remember, as the Logistics Division commander, you must be impartial. I don't want anyone to come to me and complain about you. This time, the new army has more or less suffered some losses in this battle. Let them choose from the 5,000 people we prepared before and let them replenish the organization. Yes, young master, I'll remember. Beta Persei kept nodding. One of the goals was to replenish the source of soldiers in time and restore the organization of the various divisions and regiments. Only when this requirement was met would the generals work harder in the war. They would not have to worry about the problem of too many losses after the battle. On the battlefield, they would dare to fight the enemy with their lives and fight big and fierce battles. Also, a new batch of supplies will soon be sent from Huargon City. There will be 200,000 Han people and 30,000 aspiring youths accompanying them. The food and accommodation of these people must be arranged as soon as possible. I'm not worried about the 200,000 people. We've already opened up 300,000 mu of barren land around the beginning city. It's enough for them to do whatever they want. However, we need to make good arrangements for the 30,000 young people. They can choose whether they're good at literature or martial arts. These are the future seedlings of Lengfeng. I'll leave their training to your logistics division. The Cold Front was the most powerful military force in Yangtze's forces. All the officers must be composed of Han people. Otherwise, such a powerful military force and the existence of foreign races would always be worrying. This was also a rule that Yang Qindong had set from the beginning. Understood. Young master, please don't worry. I will arrange these in advance. Beta Persei patted his chest with a reassuring look. After a while, there was the sound of footsteps outside the door. Yang Si appeared. Young master, Director Feng has brought team leader you can hear. Okay, let them in. Yang Qindong nodded, then looked at Beta Persei and continued. The new army is back. This time, the matter of dealing with the Gobi Mongolians will be handed over to them. Your logistics division is mainly responsible for the logistics this time. Ah! Beta Persei's face changed when he heard this. He thought that he would have the opportunity to go to war. He even prepared a reserve army of 5,000. But now, he was deprived of the right to go to the battlefield with just one sentence. It would be strange if he was happy. What You don't know how many people are jealous of your position as the logistics division commander. If you are allowed to go to the battlefield, how will the other generals have the chance to perform meritorious deeds? Well, of course, if you must go to the battlefield, you have to hand over the position of division commander and let someone else take it. Yang Qindong was not unreasonable. He took the initiative to give Beta Persei a chance to choose. It was said to be a choice, but the result had already been decided. For the last battlefield, Beta Persei would not give up the position of logistics division commander. He had no choice but to lower his head and say, "Young master, then I'll just take care of the logistics." Well, young master is very happy that you have such awareness. This is called doing your job. As the first division commander, you have to set a good example. When someone takes over your position in the future, they won't think about going to the battlefield. Don't worry, there will be battles for you in the future. As for now, go and arrange the work I just mentioned. Yang Qindong said in a gentle tone. It was obvious that he valued Beta Persei. The last words made Beta Persei feel warm in his heart. He immediately saluted and left. He passed by Feng Liang and Yukin, who were entering the courtyard. Both sides nodded to each other as a greeting. The hero is back. As soon as he saw Yukin, who was following Feng Liang, Yang Qindong smiled and joked. Then he took the initiative to stand up from the chair and extend his arm. Seeing Yang Qindong stand up, Feng Liang and Yukin did not dare to be negligent. They hurriedly walked a few steps and came in front of him. They first saluted and then stretched out their hands. They looked very excited. Even Yukin, who was usually very calm when dealing with people, was flushed with excitement at this moment. This was the sixth young master, the founder of Yang Xie forces. In front of him, no Yang Xie member had any reason to be arrogant. Haha, have a seat. After shaking hands with Feng Liang and Yukin, Yang Qindong smiled and pointed to the two bamboo chairs placed opposite him. Then he picked up the Grassland King cigarettes on the stone table and gave one to each of the two people in front of him. Grassland King cigarettes were the latest products in Chichen City. Considering that there was only one type of cigarette which was too monotonous, they made a few more types according to Yang Qindong's idea. For example, the very ordinary Dahai and Blue Sky cigarettes. The Grassland King cigarettes were very advanced and were not for sale. They were only provided to some high-ranking officers. Hey, this Grassland King cigarettes are milder than the God of War cigarettes. I only got one, so I have to smoke it sparingly. Feng Liang smiled and helped Yang Qindong light the cigarette. The sincere smile on his face did not show the shrewdness and calmness that an intelligence officer should have. Okay, when you leave later, I will let you take two more back. And Yukin's performance was also very good. When you leave, take two more. Yang Qindong seemed to be in a good mood and casually gave out 4 Grassland King cigarettes. Of course, the cigarettes were a small matter. The main thing was to express a friendly attitude. Sometimes, a small action could buy the hearts of many people. Feng Liang and Yukin immediately stood up to express their gratitude. Yang Qindong smiled and gestured for the two to sit back down. Then he looked at the latter and said, Yukin, this time your performance was very good. Tell me, what do you know about the Baiming army? Yes. Yukin agreed. He then gave a summary report of what he had seen and the information his subordinates had gathered. According to Yukin, the combat power of the Baiming army had increased compared to before. Perhaps it was because the Ming dynasty was divided into north and south, and the sudden rise of the mercenaries gave the emperor a lot of pressure. Now, not only did the military budget increase, but the social status of the generals also increased. Especially since firearms were prepared for the army. If they fought with Yeshen, the Tumu Castle incident would not have happened. Chapter 864. Because of the Baiming dynasty's martial prowess, many ambitious youths joined the army. In addition, the Great Ming dynasty had a large population, so the supply of soldiers wasn't a problem. It was inevitable that the army would grow stronger. Of course, there were still problems. For example, there were still some senior generals who embezzled the soldiers' pay. Fortunately, Shi Wanshan was an upright person, so this didn't happen often in the Shen mansion. There was also another major problem, which was the conflict in the heart of the Daizong Emperor. He wanted to increase the army's fighting strength, but he was also worried that the army would become too powerful. One day, their achievements would overshadow the emperor, and they wouldn't listen to his orders. As a result, the power of the eunuchs in the army would grow. This was indeed a way to keep the generals in check, but at the same time it also sowed a conflict. In the end, you can also said, sixth young master. After this incident, Shi Wanshan's reputation has indeed shot up. It seems that he is unparalleled in the limelight, and many people have even joined the army out of admiration. This will be a great boost to the strength of the Shen Manor's army. However, once eunuch Deng Chong, who has a good relationship with him, is transferred away and replaced with someone who isn't of one mind, there will be more internal problems. It's unknown how much of their fighting strength they will be able to display. Yang Qindong listened carefully, not interrupting the other party's conversation. From time to time, he would nod in agreement. When the other party finally stopped talking, he nodded. Not bad, Yukan's analysis is very good. The sixth young master will remember these things and know what to do. This time your identity was exposed in Talu. Have you thought about where you'll be working next? It's all up to the sixth young master, Yukan said without missing a beat. This time he had performed a meritorious service. Although he was only passing on an order, his courage to take risks was recognized. Most importantly, until he left, he didn't give himself away in the slightest. He didn't expose the radio station, so Shi Wanshan still couldn't figure out where his information came from. This illusion was set up very well. This was one of the main reasons why he had performed a meritorious service. With this, there would be suitable arrangements for his next job. Alright, you can go to North Korea next. Recently, their naval activities have been very frequent. They have repeatedly passed by our naval ships transporting supplies, and the distance between the two sides is getting closer and closer. If this goes on, I am afraid that sooner or later there will be a problem. Since we are going to fight, then we must first understand the situation over there. How about you be the director? Compared to his previous position as a team leader, the director was equivalent to a promotion. This was an affirmation of Kan's work and also a reward for him. Yukan immediately stood up and saluted. Sixth young master, please be at ease. I will definitely get a clear picture of the situation over there as soon as possible. Once the war starts, we will be the army's eyes and ears. Aha, good, good. Yang Qindong laughed with satisfaction. In the Great Ming Dynasty's Forbidden Sea, the strength of the sea was already very limited. This was especially so in Baiming, where there was almost no navy. Due to geographical and environmental reasons, there were not many people who knew how to swim. Even if they wanted to establish a navy, there were many problems that needed to be solved. It was not something that could be accomplished in a short period of time. North Korea was different. They were originally close to the sea, and their naval industry had always been very developed. The commander of the 1st Naval Army, Gao Xiong, reported that recently when they were transporting supplies to the sea town, they had encountered the North Korean Navy several times. Although everyone restrained themselves and did not make a move, the other party's investigation was very clear. If one did not consider the future, there would be immediate worries. North Korea should be prepared for the problem. Yang Qindong sent Yukan over to do a deeper understanding and investigation. Yukan's appointment meant that Yang Qindong didn't need to worry about him. After the new army was replenished, Yang Qindong turned his attention to the Mongol tribes in the north of the desert. According to the information provided by the Security Bureau, the escaped Tuoya had already found the 2 generals, Na Ri-song and Bao Yin. They quickly gathered 40,000 cavalrymen and went straight to the vicinity of Inma River. They used the slogan of protecting the king to start a war with Fan Yuhai. Fan Yuhai, who was already prepared, used the name of Sud Khan to wipe out the rebels. He brought 35,000 cavalrymen to engage in a bloody battle with Na Ri-song on the grasslands. Both sides suffered casualties, and they were now at a crucial moment in the battle. It's time to set off. After receiving the information, Yang Qindong called over Tiger's Mane, Xiao Feng, and the other generals. After a discussion, The army set off a day later, heading straight for the Mongol tribe in the desert. Balsi and Tan, north of Inma River, was a temporary capital built at the end of the Yuan dynasty. In the current Mongolian East Province, west of Chobyshan City, north of the middle reaches of Krulin River, Balsi Hot. At this moment, there was a cavalry war going on here. Both sides had tens of thousands of cavalrymen clashing in this area. The war had already lasted for 10 days, and there was no sign of it stopping. Fresh blood dripped onto the grasslands. From afar, it was a patch of red, like a sea of blood. One side used the name of Sud Khan to wipe out the rebellion, but they just wanted to steal the command of the Mongol tribe in the desert. The other side shouted that they wanted to save the emperor, to clean up the emperor's side. They wanted to take back the highest authority of the Mongol tribe in the desert and repeat the glory and prestige of the Golden Family. Both sides refused to give way to each other. The war went from a small-scale battle at the beginning, with only 60 to 70,000 cavalrymen joining. After 10 days, more and more small tribes joined for various benefits. The number of cavalrymen also continued to rise, reaching 100,000. Moreover, there was an endless stream of different powers joining the battlefield, causing the scale of this war to grow larger and larger, exceeding the expectations of both sides. Fan Yuhai originally thought that controlling Sud Khan was equivalent to controlling the lifeline of the Mongol tribe in the desert. When the time came, he only needed to marry Princess Tuoya, and with enough status, he could get rid of the donkey after it had outlived its usefulness. Then he would shout out, and naturally there would be countless people responding. He would then have the confidence to challenge the mercenaries. In the future, he would even become one of the overlords of the grasslands, and it was not impossible for him to unify the grasslands. He never would have thought that something that did not seem very difficult would happen because Sud Khan faked taking medicine and told the truth to Princess Tuoya, causing her to suddenly escape. Although he had used this time to control some of the Mongol army, and with Sud Khan it was equivalent to having a righteous cause and seemed to have the upper hand. However, he forgot one thing, and that was that everyone had ambition, especially the Mongol tribe in the desert. The army was not centralized, and they did not have any large cities to rely on. Over time, the Mongol tribe in the desert had long lost its military power, forming many small tribes and small powers. In the past, when Sud Khan was here with his understanding of these small powers, he could still forcefully command them. But now, Sud Khan lay in bed every day, looking like he was just waiting to die. He did not care about any political matters, and the entire tribe was in chaos. It had only been 10 days since the start of the war, and there were already more than 10 leaders of small tribes who came to visit him. On the surface, they came to see Sud Khan, but in reality, they came to negotiate with Fan Yuhai, the true leader, to seek their own benefits. Some of the leaders of these small tribes only had a few hundred cavalrymen under their command, while others had 1,000 cavalrymen. The more powerful ones had thousands to thousands of cavalrymen under their command. The conditions they proposed were also based on their own strength. The stronger the leader, the more benefits they would ask for. On the other hand, the weaker the leader, the less benefits they would ask for. Some would even ask for 1,000 horses and sheep. Facing these leaders who came to negotiate with him, Fan Yuhai did not reject any of them. He didn't have that many resources in his hands, but it didn't matter. He had Sudur Khan in his hands, and he had righteousness. He gave away large tracts of land and fertile grazing lands just to win the support of these tribes. After all, the land was not his, and Fan Yuhai did not feel any heartache when giving out these things. Not to mention, he had a little plan in his heart. Once he defeated Tuoya's army and became the true Khan, he would be able to take back everything that he had given out. At that time, if anyone dared to resist, he would kill them. All along, Fan Yuhai had been a person who would do anything to achieve his goals. This was the case when he was in Jiaoji, and it was still the case now. The news of Fan Yuhai's generosity spread far and wide. Some of the leaders of the smaller tribes who had wanted to sit back and watch were also moved. They all came to Fan Yuhai's tent to ask for benefits. After they were satisfied, batch after batch of cavalrymen joined the camp. Fan Yuhai's forces grew bigger and bigger. There were strong and there were weak. In comparison, Princess Tuoya's side's development was a bit too slow. There were also people who came to ask for benefits, but Tuoya tactfully refused with a sentence, saying that everything would be decided by her father. However, she still did not forget to say that as long as someone helped her and her father, she would definitely be grateful. It was only a sentence of gratitude, without any concrete repayment. Naturally, the support she received was much less. Immediately, more and more small tribes went to Fan Yuhai's side, and it wouldn't be long before they announced that they would join their camp. Another few days later, the scouts at the front brought back news. Outside Fan Yuhai's camp, there had already been 3 successive expansions. Looking from afar, the number of cavalry had long been densely packed, impossible to count. When the news reached Princess Tuoya, the expressions of the 2 great generals who supported her, Narisong and Bao Yin, became extremely ugly. According to the current situation, if they were to fight with Fan Yuhai, they might not stand a chance. However, it was precisely at this time that a new piece of news arrived. The Mongol tribe's General Sahaba was currently leading 30,000 cavalry straight towards them. The front army's cavalry was already less than 10 li from them. Chapter 865. General Sahaba was in existence second only to Khan Sud in the Mongol Empire. 2 years ago, Sahaba's father died of illness, and he took over all military and political authority. However, this person did not immediately make any movements, instead maintaining an extremely low profile and managing the army and territory his father left behind. Because of his exceptionally low profile, his presence was very low, and he was gradually forgotten by others. Now that he suddenly appeared, and even brought 30,000 cavalry, it was clear that he was preparing to make his move. Is Big Brother Sahaba coming? That's great, our relationship was already very good when we were young. He must have come to help us. Princess Tuoya, who received the news, walked out from her tent. Her haggard appearance completely changed, and her face was filled with anticipation and excitement. People always said that feelings when one was young were the purest. Perhaps only at that time friendship was not mixed with any distribution of benefits. Tuoya was filled with all kinds of expectations towards Sahaba's appearance. While waiting, even anxiously waiting, Sahaba finally arrived. Right at the entrance of the camp, Tuoya saw Sahaba, who was already close to 30 years old after being separated for 2 years. Right now, he seemed to have become even more mature. The extra beard on his face added a bit of manly charm. Big Brother Sahaba. Princess Tuoya welcomed him with a face full of joy. Little Sister Tuoya. Sahaba also welcomed her with a face full of smiles. The two stood together, and from afar, they actually gave off a feeling of a talented man and a beautiful woman. Princess Tuoya had great expectations towards Sahaba's arrival. After catching up, both sides sat down in the tent, and then began to discuss the matter of the allied army. However, the greater one's hope, the greater the disappointment. It wasn't that Sahaba was unwilling to ally with Princess Tuoya. On the contrary, he took the initiative to bring up this matter. He expressed that he was willing to defeat the foreign Fan Yuhai together with them, save Khan Sud, and restore the glory of the Mongol Empire. However, at the same time, he also raised a request, and that was, if they wanted to send troops, there was a prerequisite, and that was that Tuoya must marry him. Sahaba finally revealed his fox's tail. According to what he said, he was still young, and his words had not reached the level where they carried enormous weight in the tribe. This request was also raised by the elders in his tribe. If he did not agree to their request, then he would not be able to ally with Tuoya and would not be able to send troops to help them. At first, Sahaba had a troubled look on his face. Regarding this, Tuoya still had hope and said that the marriage was fine, but couldn't everything be discussed after saving her father? After all, her father was still trapped in a coma. As his daughter, if she married someone else, a marriage without the blessings of her family would not be a happy one. Sahaba rejected the offer right away. He had to get married. Only then would the alliance between the two sides be unbreakable. Not only that, but the military power of both sides would be handed over to him in the end. This would be a great advantage for him to command the army better and defeat Fan Yuhai. If it was just a marriage alliance, Tuoya still had a glimmer of hope in her heart. But now, the other party even wanted to get their hands on military power. Even a fool could see what was going on. Tuoya did not immediately agree. Instead, she expressed that she needed to think about it. That night, Tuoya had a discussion with Na Risong and General Bao Yin, and finally came to a conclusion. Sahaba and Fan Yuhai were the same. They were both ambitious people. Once they formed an alliance with them, it would be no different from asking a tiger for its skin. The nature of this peace talk had already changed. There was no need to continue. After coming to a conclusion, even though Tuoya was very disappointed, it could be said that one of her worries had been resolved. At least she knew one thing, and that was that, in front of enormous benefits, nothing was reliable. No one would remain unchanged forever. Sahaba's appearance only gave her a deeper understanding of human nature. In the future, when she encountered things, she would have less hope and luck. That night, after making her decision, Tuoya slept very soundly. What she didn't know was that when she woke up the next morning, everything had changed. Just last night, General Bao Yin encountered an assassination attempt. His injuries were serious, and it was likely that he wouldn't live for long. Even more terrifying things had yet to come. Apart from the 5,000 cavalry under General Na Risong and the 5,000 cavalry under General Bao Yin, who was in a daze, the other 20,000 cavalry officers that belonged to them had all thrown their lot in with Sahaba. Perhaps in the eyes of the grassland men, they didn't have the tradition of listening to women. In comparison, Sahaba was clearly more reliable than Princess Tuoya. He was more of a trustworthy person. She ran into Bao Yin's tent like a madwoman and saw General Bao Yin lying on the bed with a pale face. Among all the generals, Bao Yin had the best personal relationship with Tuoya. He was also the person she trusted the most other than her father. But now they were going to be separated by life and death forever. Tears flowed down Tuoya's eyes uncontrollably. "Princess, don't cry anymore. He's already dead. It's just that Tingri might like me a little more. That's why they urgently summoned me." At this time, Bao Yin still forced a smile. He reached out and used all his strength to place a commander's seal in Tuoya's hand. "Princess, Bao Yin won't be able to accompany you in the future. I'll watch over you from the sky. You should do what you like. Don't force yourself. The grassland is still the world of men. Women should be protected." Bao Yin was dead. Before he died, he even said that he suspected that the assassin was sent by Sahaba. Otherwise, it was hard to believe that an assassin could pass through the heavily protected military camp and come to the core of the grassland to kill. Na Risong had the same opinion. He was worried that he would be the next one to die, so he suggested to Tuoya that they should leave this place. He had 5,000 soldiers. Before Bao Yin died, he passed the military power to Tuoya, so he had another 5,000 soldiers. If they really wanted to charge out, it wasn't as if the 10,000 cavalry had no chance at all. Tuoya calmly rejected Na Risong's idea of killing her way out. She did something unbelievable and walked into Sahaba's tent alone. Tuoya didn't want to agree to the conditions of the peace talks. She wanted to lay her cards on the table. She didn't say who was responsible for Bao Yin's death. She only expressed that she was tired of this place and wanted to leave temporarily. After Sahaba and Fan Yuhai had a winner, she might consider marrying the winner. But now she didn't want to be involved in this matter. If Sahaba didn't agree, she would bring 10,000 soldiers and charge out. If that happened, it would only result in a situation where both sides suffered losses. Tuoya's sudden change in attitude made Sahaba seem as if he didn't know her, but it had to be said that he wasn't prepared to fall out with her. Otherwise, he wouldn't have sent people to assassinate Bao Yin, but directly sent troops to control them. Tuoya won. Under the threat of her life, she successfully brought Narasong and 10,000 cavalrymen who were willing to follow her out of the great tent. Apart from taking away some necessities, she was forced to leave behind most of the things for the similarly ambitious Sahaba. The situation gradually became clear. Sahaba replaced Tuoya and became the person who would compete with Fan Yuhai for the right to decide the grassland. When the two heroes met, a great battle was unavoidable. At this time, Yang Chendong led the new army and the ferocious tiger regiment across the Inma River and appeared at the edge of the battlefield. After the new army took down Tulu City, they quickly returned to the first city to rest and reorganize. Then, they replenished their manpower from the logistics division. After the organization was full, they followed Yang Chendong out of the first city. They passed through the Wanda city until they crossed the Inma River and arrived at the main battlefield. Along with them was the ferocious tiger regiment led by Xiaofeng. Although there weren't many of them, only 2,000 of them, they were made up of the most elite members of the Cold Front. In terms of combat strength, they weren't inferior at all. They were also Yang Chendong's greatest reliance in this battle. If only based on the number of soldiers, Yang Chendong's forces were probably the smallest. Fan Yuhai's methods were brilliant and he was willing to offer great benefits. It didn't take long for him to unite more than 20 tribes of various sizes. The number of soldiers also increased from 35,000 to 120,000. Sahaba's many years of forbearance showed that this person was different. After he annexed Tuoya's 20,000 soldiers, he also reached an alliance agreement with some tribes of various sizes. In addition to the 30,000 soldiers he brought with him, the total number of soldiers reached 110,000. One was 120,000, the other was 110,000. Yang Chendong's new army and the ferocious tiger regiment were far from 30,000 soldiers. There was no doubt that they were the weakest. But who dared to look down on him? With the title of War God and the name of Longevity Heaven's Messenger, no one dared to look down on him. After the mercenary army crossed the Inma River, they found a very spacious place and stopped. With such a place, he didn't have to worry about others sneaking up on him. Just as the military tent was set up, Tiger's Mane walked into the main tent with an excited face. When he saw Yang Chendong, he saluted and asked for battle. "Young master, when are we going to fight? Who are we going to fight first?" Haha. Looking at Tiger's Mane who walked into the tent, Yang Chendong smiled. Although Tiger's Mane had matured a lot after all these days of training, he was still a young man in his 20s. With a big battle before him, it was inevitable that he would act rashly. Yang Chendong only smiled and didn't say anything. This made Tiger's Mane very anxious. "Young master, say something. Who are we going to fight first?" "When did I say we were going to fight?" Looking at Tiger's Mane's anxious face, Yang Chendong shook his head lightly. "Tiger's Mane, why didn't your deputy commander and Commander Xiaofeng come with you this time?" "Ah, the vice commander has to deal with some logistics matters, and Commander Xiao has to patrol the barracks. At this point, Hu Mang suddenly froze. He finally understood why the sixth young master asked this question. Chapter 866. Seeing that Tiger's Mane had understood, Yang Chendong simply explained the matter. "Your deputy commander didn't have something to do. He saw something and probably tried to dissuade you, but you didn't listen. As for Xiaofeng, he probably told you to wait for the young master's call, right?" "Ah, young master. How did the young master know?" Tiger's Mane was shocked. "It's not that I know everything, but they are all smart people. They can predict what they will do in advance. As for you, of course, you're not stupid. It's just that you feel that you are too close to me, so you don't have to worry about anything. All right, you can go back. If there's anything you don't understand, ask your deputy commander and learn more." Yang Chendong waved his hand and reprimanded Tiger's Mane. Yang Si, who came out with the army, lightly patted Tiger's Mane and brought him out of the main tent with a confused expression. Tiger's Mane left the main tent and went to find the deputy commander. He finally realized how reckless his actions were. "Commander, since the sixth young master is here, we must fight. But now that Fan Yuhai and Sahaba are in the middle of a battle, why should we make a move now? Letting them exhaust their strength for a while will only be beneficial to us." Tiger's Mane's face couldn't help but turn red when he heard the deputy commander's words. He wanted to win more battles and prove himself, but who would have thought that the more he wanted to, the easier it was to make mistakes. He immediately admitted that his impulsive request to fight was wrong, and even asked the deputy commander to teach him if there were any problems in the future. Facing the popular person beside the sixth young master, The deputy commander was flattered. He immediately said that if there were any problems in the future, he would discuss it with the deputy commander. No matter what, the mercenaries stopped moving after they appeared beside the river of Water Horse. Scouts from all sides reported that they spent their days either eating, sleeping, or training. It was as if they really treated this place as their training ground. When the news reached Fan Yuhai's ears, his face darkened, but there was nothing he could do. Fan Yuhai knew better than anyone how big of a threat Yang Chendong was. If there was one person in the world that he didn't want to fight, it would be Yang Chendong. It was just that fate made fools of people. Wherever he appeared, this person would appear. It was as if this person was born to go against him. Even though Yang Chengwang's cavalry was less than 30,000, Fan Yuhai had never underestimated them. In his eyes, this army was even stronger than Sahaba's 110,000 men. However, even though he knew this, he couldn't attack Yang Chendong right now. Fan Yuhai had no confidence in defeating Yang Chendong. 120,000 cavalrymen seemed to be on a grand scale, as if there was nothing they couldn't do. However, how many of them were actually just a motley crew? How many of them were disloyal to him? With such an army, it was easy to win a battle. Everyone would swarm forward and share the fruits of victory. However, if they lost the battle, the morale of the army would be greatly affected. If things went wrong, the army's morale would fall apart. At that time, not to mention conquering the grasslands, whether or not they could even leave this place alive would be another matter. Even though he knew that such a result was very likely to happen, if he still sent out his troops, then he wouldn't be the famous General Fan Yuhai, but a stupid pig. Forget it, I'll let you enjoy for a few days. Once I defeat Sahaba and unify the entire northern desert grasslands, it won't be too late to fight you then. Men, keep a close eye on the movements of the mercenaries. Report to me immediately if anything happens. In the end, Fan Yuhai still didn't make any preparations to fight Yang Chendong. Sahaba also made the same decision as Fan Yuhai. This person had long heard of the war god's name and knew that he wasn't easy to deal with. In the face of a great enemy, he naturally wouldn't be distracted. Not only did he not provoke the mercenaries, but he also sent people to meet Yang Chendong with generous gifts. It was as if the two sides would work together to eliminate Fan Yuhai first, and then they would share the Mongolian tribe in the north equally. Sahaba had a good plan. Who knew that Yang Chendong was so easy to get along with? You want to borrow his power to eliminate Fan Yuhai and then deal with the mercenaries? You're dreaming too much. Yang Chendong, who was very clear about this matter, handed the matter of the alliance to Deputy Commander Shi Bi. He believed that this person would understand his intentions. It was better to pretend to be polite first. As for whether they really wanted to form an alliance, it was not impossible. Everything would depend on the outcome of the battle. However, before the situation was settled, he wouldn't casually participate in the battle. With such an opportunity to exhaust the enemy, he wouldn't foolishly make a move. As for whether or not someone would make a move against him, if there really was someone who didn't want to live, then he might as well give it a try. He would definitely make that person regret it for the rest of his life. The Northern Desert Mongol War didn't stop because of the arrival of the mercenaries. On the contrary, it became more intense. Neither Fan Yuhai nor Sahaba could understand Yang Chendong's thoughts. They just wanted to end the battle quickly, finish the battle as soon as possible. After a victor was decided, then they could deal with the mercenaries who were eyeing them covetously. Under such pressure, the 200,000 cavalry fought on the grasslands for more than a month, from the beginning of summer to the middle of summer. Many areas that were originally rich with water and grass were dyed red with blood. In just a month, the number of dead and injured grassland cavalry had reached more than 100,000. More than 30 tribal leaders were either killed on the battlefield or their subordinates were all killed. They became a commander without an army, a civilian. After more than a month, Fan Yuhai only had 40,000 cavalry left. Sahaba had 35,000 cavalry. The final battle was about to begin. In the deputy commander's tent of the mercenaries, the messengers sent by Sahaba were making all kinds of promises. There was only one thing they wanted, and that was in the upcoming battle they hoped the mercenaries could help. Once Fan Yuhai was defeated, they could divide the grasslands equally. This wasn't the first time they had made such a request. But this time, the messengers sent by Sahaba had undoubtedly put in a lot of effort. They actually took out a detailed map of the northern desert Mongol tribes and marked out the details of dividing the grasslands equally. Among them, there were indeed some good locations that were allocated to the mercenaries. The sincerity of the messengers seemed to have moved the deputy commander. He showed a very greedy look and said, "These and those places are really for us?" The messengers looked at the messengers and calmed him down. He wasn't afraid of greed, but he was afraid that the messengers didn't ask for anything. Now that there was a need, the following matters would be easier to negotiate. "Yes, since our general said so, then these places will be given to you after defeating Fan Yuhai." "Good, good. Let me report to the war god. He will give us an answer later." She kept nodding her head. Before she left, she took a few more glances at that piece of land with a reluctant look on her face. Not long after, Sahaba appeared in the main tent. When he arrived, Yang Chendong looked up from his book. "Oh, Deputy Commander Sahaba, do you think it's time for us to attack?" "Yes." Sahaba stood straight and replied, "I think that in the current situation, if we don't attack, both Fan Yuhai and Sahaba will have some misgivings. In the upcoming battle, they probably won't use their full strength. Now it seems that their strength has been weakened quite a bit, but after our scouts' investigation, not all of the 200,000 Mongolian soldiers died on the battlefield. Most of them retreated because they couldn't see the situation clearly." Yang Chendong looked up and frowned. "Continue." "Yes." Shibi continued. "In other words, the Mongol tribes in the north of the desert still have some fighting power. Once one of them becomes the final winner, it's very likely that more people will defect and join them if they call for help. If that really happens, even if we want to become enemies with them, it will be much more difficult. This is not in our interest. But if we can directly determine the victor through this battle, or even if we can inform both sides, we can avoid this situation to the greatest extent." Feeling the need to explain the situation in detail, Shirbi continued, "If we become the final winner, even if the Mongolian tribes in the north of the desert are dissatisfied, they won't be able to gather in a short period of time without someone to carry the burden. This will create time for us to defeat them one by one. At that time, we can pull in one group and fight another group. With a group watching from the sidelines, the problem here will be solved." "Good." Yang Chendong slapped the armrest of the chair and stood up. "Very good. Looks like Vice Commander Sahaba already has a plan in mind. That's very good. How about this? Tell me the details of the situation. If we agree to Sahaba's request and join forces with them, we can guarantee that we can deal a heavy blow to both sides and dominate." "Yes, then Sahaba will tell the sixth young master. The plan is still not fully developed. If there are any parts that are not suitable, I hope the sixth young master can give me some pointers." Sahaba's face was also filled with excitement. No matter how good the idea was, it had to be approved before it could be realized. Now that Yang Chendong had said so, the success rate of this matter was undoubtedly higher. In the following time, the two of them chatted in the tent for a long time. Dinner was directly sent in. Even so, they still talked until the soldiers had gone to sleep. In the middle of the night, Sahaba and Tiger's Mane, as well as the leader of the ferocious tiger regiment, Xiaofeng, left the tent. Although it was already very late, the faces of the three officers were filled with excitement. It was obvious that this meeting was very successful, achieving their long-cherished wish. Chapter 867. On the second day, Sherbet woke up early. As the representative of the mercenaries in the negotiation, he finally gave the Sahaba emissary an accurate reply. The mercenaries supported the final battle and would stand firmly on Sahaba's side to deal with Fan Yuhai, an outsider. The messenger naturally left in high spirits. He returned to Sahaba's camp and reported the accurate information he just received. In the main tent, Sahaba laughed loudly. "Good, it seems like the great Ming's loyal duke is very sensible. He knows that we are the orthodox and the ruler here. Yes. The messenger walked forward with a flattering face and said, "Even if the great Ming's loyal duke is powerful, it's only in the great Ming. Like us nomads, we don't even have a city. They won't pay attention to such a place. So in the negotiation, they only propose that once they help us defeat Fan Yuhai, they hope that both sides will not invade each other in the future. If they are willing, they can even engage in friendly trade." Ha ha ha, it seems like the great Ming's loyal duke is also a person with ideas. He doesn't want to waste his energy on us. That's right. He has the Ming dynasty behind him. I think he should be very interested in the throne. Why would he look at a poor place like ours? However, there's no need to engage in trade. I heard that although their things are good, they are very expensive. If we need them, there's no need to buy them. We can just rob them. As for not invading each other, we will agree to it first. As for whether it will be forever, it will depend on the changes in the situation before we make the final decision. Oh? I wonder what the general means. The messenger seemed to not understand, but he also seemed to have understood. However, at this moment, in order to flatter, he pretended to ask for advice. The situation is always changing. If the great Ming's messenger comes and is willing to give us more things, then we might as well join hands with them to deal with this loyal duke. You have to know that the Han people have a saying that there are no eternal friends and no eternal enemies. There are only eternal benefits. Ha ha ha. Sahaba laughed happily at his own cleverness. The messenger on the side said in an exaggerated manner, "Brilliant, truly brilliant. General, you are young and promising. With your leadership in the future, our Mongol tribe in the north of the desert will become stronger. It is not impossible for us to recover the glory of Genghis Khan." Ha ha. Ha ha ha. Sahaba, who was in a good mood, couldn't stop laughing. Then, he seemed to have thought of something and said, "If you want to truly unify the Mongol tribes in the north of the desert, you have to be a member of the Golden Family. Otherwise, no one will acknowledge you in their hearts. By the way, is there any news about the search for Princess Tuoya?" "Not yet. I'm just afraid that even if we find her, she won't easily bow down to us." The emissary shook his head and said, "Once Fan Yuhai is defeated and the Duke of Loyalty is chased away, there will only be a featherless Khagan left. He won't be able to pose any threat. Even if he can survive this final battle, whether he can survive or not is another matter. At that time, Princess Tuoya will no longer have a father, and many things will not be up to her to decide." At this moment, Sahaba had gradually revealed his foxtail and revealed his ambitions. Previously, when he allowed Tuoya to leave, it was not because he was afraid of her, but because he was not strong enough. If he fell out at that time, some people would inevitably think that he was too domineering, and would not join hands with him. However, once he defeated Fan Yuhai and grasped the general situation, he would not have so many misgivings when doing certain things. "How about this? Send out some people, you must find Princess Tuoya's location." "Yes, General, this subordinate understands." The emissary nodded and quickly left. There was no one else in the tent, and Sahaba's face was gloomy. "Duke of Loyalty, oh Duke of Loyalty, you're only so. You're willing to send troops to help me so easily. This is the strength of your Han people, but also your weakness. This time I'll teach you how to be a person, ha ha ha." It was no wonder that Sahaba was so excited. In the eyes of the Mongol people, the Han people were people with a broad mind, especially those who had the ability to become kings or emperors. Their Han people's Confucianism emphasized on having a broad mind, accepting all rivers into the sea, and helping the world and people. They preferred to provide help in times of need, as if only by doing so could they show their wisdom and greatness. This was both a strength and a weakness. Just like the Mongols of the past, when they were weak, they would ask for help from the Han people. As long as they put on a pitiful look and said a few words of flattery and worship, they would receive a lot of help. Once they became strong, it would be time for them to point their troops at the Han people. If they won, it would be a good thing, but even if they lost, it was not a big deal. At most, they would just lower their heads and admit their mistakes. After all, this was what their ancestors did, and it was not shameful. Clearly, This Duke of Loyalty had such an impression in Sahaba's heart. As for whether Yang Chendong would play any tricks, Sahaba did not think otherwise. The promises of the Han people were still very reassuring. Presumably, this Duke of Loyalty was a person with big plans, and would not go back on his words. Of course, Yang Chendong would not go back on his words. Since he had promised Sahaba that he would send troops, he would definitely send troops. However, what kind of troops and how much effort was another matter altogether. Was Yang Chendong a Han? The answer was definitely yes. However, he was different from most Han leaders. He had a dark side in his heart, a cunning side, and even a black-bellied side. History had already told him how much he had suffered when dealing with foreign countries. As someone who came from the future, Yang Chendong would definitely not walk the same path as his ancestors. After doing something, they would regret it for the rest of their lives, and even harm their descendants. What he wanted to do was to do whatever was beneficial to him. As for whether or not it would attract the curses of others, he did not care so much. Who cared if the flood would reach the heavens after his death? What he wanted to do now was to lay down a solid and unshakable foundation for the Han people. As for the future generations who were ignorant and incompetent, and wanted to lose this foundation, that was not something he could care about. He only needed to do his best. At the very least, the bigger the foundation, the slower the speed of squandering. At the very least, the Han people had once reached the peak of this world, so he could not be considered to have made a trip to this world. Under the scheming of each side, the weak alliance was formed, and the next thing to do was to wait for the day of the final battle. 4 days later, under Sahaba's deliberate pressure, in the grasslands 2 li west of Yinma River, in front of the temporary capital built by Balsk and Tan at the end of the Yuan dynasty, his 35,000 cavalry faced off against Fan Yuhai's 40,000 cavalry. The sun was high up in the sky, shining down on every single one of the cavalrymen, giving them a very hot feeling. However, the 70,000 warriors acted as if they did not hear anything. At this moment, both sides were staring at each other. Crossbows and sabers were in their hands, and they looked like they were ready to make the final charge at any time. Fan Yuhai rode on his warhorse. Clad in full armor, he narrowed his eyes at the ferocious Sahaba. He did not know why, but he had a very bad feeling. Logically speaking, he had 5,000 more cavalrymen than the other side, and he should be more confident in himself. However, looking at the other side, Sahaba's face was clearly calm and composed. This was not the kind of confidence that was faked, but true confidence. Just based on this, the other side should have something to rely on. Could it be that he has invited another Mongol tribe to help him? Fan Yuhai thought so in his heart, but soon he shook his head. He didn't think that any tribe would be stupid enough to interfere when the outcome of the battle was still undecided. After all, preserving one's strength and waiting to reap the benefits should be what smart people and wise people would do. If this was not the reason, then what was the reason? Could it be that Sahaba was stupid? Did he really think that his 35,000 cavalrymen could defeat his 40,000 army? Unable to figure it out, Fan Yuhai felt very annoyed. He didn't like this feeling. He even regretted capturing Sud Khan and holding the emperor to order his vassals. Originally, he thought that this was a chance for him to control the Mongolian tribe in the north of the desert. Who would have thought that Suder would pretend to take medicine and deceive him? Then Tuoya learned the truth and escaped. Finally, a reckless and difficult Sahaba jumped out. This person was like a cockroach. His vitality was extremely tenacious, and he liked to charge forward. In the face of absolute strength, many of Fan Yuhai's schemes could not be executed. Everything was so unsatisfactory, and in the end, it had reached the point where he had to fight with Sahaba. This caused Fan Yuhai to feel extremely annoyed. Fan Yuhai was more skilled in scheming and studying people's hearts. He hid behind the scenes and played tricks while others fought and killed in front of him. But now he was forced to the front line, and it was a decisive battle. This was not what he was good at. Fortunately, Fan Yuhai still had a trump card, such as Sud Khan in his hands. This hostage was only useful on the battlefield. Now that the decisive battle was about to begin, it was time to push him out. Men, summon the Khan. Fan Yuhai's voice came out clearly from his mouth. Yes. General Zhang Meng replied and turned to leave. In a short while, Sud Khan rode onto the battlefield under the watchful eyes of the crowd. Suda's gunshot wound had long since healed. After all, it wasn't a serious injury, and the bullet didn't hit his body. If it wasn't for Fan Yuhai's tricks, he could have even stood up and led the entire tribe, looking for an opportunity to rise again. Chapter 868. However, under the current circumstances, Suda knew that the so-called rising of the Eastern Mountain was nothing more than a dream. Based on what Fan Yuhai had done to him, he hated him, and Fan Yuhai knew this as well. Fan Yuhai would definitely not let him live. The only reason he was still sitting on the horse was because he was still useful. As soon as Suda appeared, the cavalry opened up a path for him, allowing him to easily reach Fan Yuhai's side. Following this, the devil's voice sounded in his ears. Go and shout. Tell them to put down their weapons and surrender with the identity of the Khan. Otherwise, it would be tantamount to betraying the entire Mongol tribe, and they would be killed without mercy. Don't think about playing any tricks. Otherwise, I can guarantee that you will die miserably. Go. There was a smile on his face, but his words were incomparably vicious. When Suda heard this, he couldn't help but tremble. This person was a devil, and it was because of his existence that the Mongol tribes in the north of the Gobi Desert had been killing each other. Under the intense internal friction, the originally prosperous Gobi Desert Mongol tribes had suffered a huge drop in strength. He had never treated the Mongol cavalry as his brothers. He had only treated them as killing weapons in his hands. If such a person were to rule over the entire tribe, it would bring about disastrous consequences. The entire tribe might even fall into a state of eternal damnation because of this. This was what Suda was thinking, and it was also the conclusion that he had come to after these days of analysis. Hearing his reminder, Suda nodded and rode his horse forward. He stopped about 40 meters away from Zhao Hai. At this position, Suda could even feel a few crossbows pointing at him. If he dared to charge forward, he would immediately become a porcupine. Suda would not do such a risky thing. He did not think that he would be safe just because he had escaped to Sahaba's side. Sahaba was also a hungry wolf, and if there was a chance, he would also viciously take a bite out of him. Suda stopped his horse and looked up at the grassland sky. For some reason, at this moment, he felt that the sky was so blue, so clear, and so beautiful. However, all of this beauty was about to leave him. In his heart, he knew that this might be the last time he saw the blue sky of Mongolia. Longevity heaven, wait for me. Your believer is coming for you. Suda, who was looking up, suddenly seemed to have changed into a different person. His fatigued look had completely disappeared, and his eyes shone brightly as he looked at the tens of thousands of Mongolian cavalrymen. Suddenly, he shouted out, Warriors, you are the pride of our Mongolian tribe, and you are the future of our tribe. Now, as the Khan, I order you for the last time. Kill this devil behind me who is eyeing our foundation. Kill Fan Yuhai and avenge your dead brothers and loved ones. Kill. Ah! Suda, who had just raised his arm, suddenly felt his back tighten. Then, a few more arrows landed on his body at the same time. Due to the arrows, his strength was rapidly draining away. Is it finally going to end? Suda asked himself, but there was no pain on his face. Instead, there was a slight smile on his face. It was a smile of someone who had completely let go of everything and was completely relaxed. His life was finally coming to an end, but at the last moment, he exposed Fan Yuhai's wild ambition. It could be considered as his last contribution to the Mongolian tribe in the north of the Gobi Desert. He did not lose his dignity as a Khan. Longevity heaven, I'm coming. The Khan of the Mongolian tribe of Gobi had his life ended just like that. It also marked the end of an era. Suda was dead, and one of the arrows was from Fan Yuhai, who was 40 meters behind him. He did not expect that this old man would be so fearless of death. He dared to say such words at the end. These words had greatly shaken the morale of his troops, and could cause him to fall into eternal damnation. On the other side of the camp, Sahaba was laughing so hard that he could not close his mouth. Originally, he was still thinking about how to deal with Suitor after this victory. He would definitely not allow such a person to step on his head, so killing this person was something that had to be done. The difficult part was how to kill him silently and not have anything to do with him. For this, he had given orders to many of his generals to do it secretly. Now, he did not need to think about it anymore. Fan Yuhai had done what he wanted to do the most for him. Now, he just needed to use this momentum to take the initiative to send out his troops. Warriors of the grasslands, you've all heard the Khan's final words. This Fan Yuhai is a foreign race, and his existence is a disaster for our tribe. Now, the Khan has used his life to tell us the truth. Now, let's kill this demon together. Kill! Kill! The 35,000 Mongol cavalry all roared out, and the vanguard of the 10,000 cavalry charged towards Fan Yuhai's army. Dust flew into the air, and the final battle had begun. Fan Yuhai's face was ashen. The development of the situation was completely out of his expectations. Suitor's appearance made him feel like he had smashed his own foot with a rock. But now that things had come to this, there was no point in saying anything. At this moment, he raised the saber in his hand and pointed it forward, shouting, "Brothers, let's kill together. We have more people than them. As long as we win this battle, everyone will enjoy endless glory and wealth. Here, I swear to everlasting heaven that I will never let you down. Kill!" General Lu Duo took this opportunity to shout, and led the 10,000 vanguard cavalry, who had already disobeyed Shangda Khan, to charge forward. Fan Yuhai swore a deadly oath, and barely managed to stabilize the morale of his troops. But he knew that this was far from enough. After all, Suitor's identity was there. After being the Khan for so many years, his influence on the entire tribe must be huge. But it did not matter. As long as he could defeat Sahaba and use facts to prove everything, there was still a chance for him to turn the tables. 20,000 cavalrymen clashed on the vast grasslands. Sabers and spears clashed. Drums sounded like thunder. The cavalrymen surged on the battlefield, and the smell of blood filled the air. Sahaba watched as the 10,000 cavalrymen charged into the formation but did not gain any advantage. He could not help but ask the messenger beside him anxiously, "Didn't you say that the Duke of Loyalty agreed to work with us? Why haven't we seen them yet?" This. The messenger was sweating profusely. He did not know how to explain himself. "Humph, don't tell me they were scared away." Sahaba scolded angrily. "Oh no, they have sent more troops." At this moment, a general's shout attracted Sahaba's attention. As expected, Fan Yuhai had increased the number of troops again. Perhaps Fan Yuhai also knew where their advantage lay. It was precisely the additional 5,000 cavalrymen. Based on this alone, they could completely use this advantage to completely defeat Sahaba. Only by doing so could they eliminate the negative effects of Suda's words before his death. "We will send more troops too. Then immediately send someone to contact the Duke of Loyalty. What are they doing?" At this point, Sahaba had no other choice. He could only accompany Fan Yuhai in sending more troops. But he did not forget to ask for Yang Qindong's help. This was his trump card. With the agreement of both sides, another 10,000 soldiers were sent into the battlefield. It was said that more than 10,000 soldiers were boundless. At this moment, 40,000 cavalrymen were fighting together. The scene was spectacular. It was fortunate that this was the grassland, the source of the earth was vast. Otherwise, even if these people stood there without moving, they would not be able to stand on any ordinary terrain. The sound of fighting continued. Every moment, there would be a grassland warrior falling off his horse. Every second, there would be a life lost. Human life was precious, but sometimes, it was also fragile. Just like in war, human life was always the most worthless existence. A general success was built on the death of 10,000 soldiers. Often, a victory was built on the blood and lives of countless people. It was so tragic. It could be said that those who had never fought in war would never know the preciousness of peace. True peace also required countless martyrs to pay the price of countless lives in exchange for it. At this point, as a retired Special Forces soldier, Longzi expressed his highest respect to the martyrs of the revolution. On the battlefield, the chaotic battle continued. It had been more than 6 hours, but both sides were still locked in a stalemate. Neither side had a strong advantage. The stalemate continued. Sahaba was like an ant on a hot pan. He was extremely anxious. The reinforcements had not arrived yet. If the battle continued, he was afraid that he would be the one to lose. However, what he didn't know was that 50 miles away from them, the mercenaries were slowly making their way over. According to Yang Chundong himself, he would form an alliance with Sahaba and send troops. But when the troops would be sent was up to him. Sahaba obviously wanted to use him. He even wanted to take care of him after defeating Fan Yuhai. Since that was the case, how could he let others do as they wished? He was a person who was not afraid of things getting out of hand. So, he was quite satisfied with the delayed reinforcements. Oh, it meant that it was quite slow. Send someone to inform Sahaba that we're already on our way to the battlefield. We'll be there soon. Tell him to hold on. Riding on the white dragon horse, Yang Chundong looked at the midsummer scenery of the grassland, while speaking with a relaxed expression. Yes. Instead of saluting, he immediately arranged for a scout to go ahead and report first. Beside Yang Chundong, Tiger's Mane laughed loudly. Young master, you are the one who is really watching from the sidelines. But if Sahaba were to know that while we were aiding them, we also sent people to destroy their rear rations, I'm afraid he would have the heart to kill us. Ha ha ha. Chapter 869. That's right, just now, the new direct subordinate regiment was sent out. Their target was the supply base behind Sahaba. Once they occupied that place and the news spread, the military camp would definitely be shaken. One could only imagine what kind of expression Sahaba would have. You can't blame the young master for being ruthless. They were the ones who targeted me first. Do they think it's that easy to hire us mercenaries? How can I not get some interest? Yang Chundong said leisurely as he rode on his horse. When the corps officers of the new army heard this, their hearts trembled. In the future, no one should ever think of messing with the sixth young master. Otherwise, the consequences would be very dire. Of course, they were also glad that they were the sixth young master's men and not his enemies. The army was still advancing at a steady pace. Every 15 minutes, there would be scouts coming to report the situation at the front. From this, it could be seen that Yang Chundong was still paying attention to the situation at all times. Once there was any hint of deviation from his plan, he would immediately adjust the military deployment. He walked slowly and saw that it was already afternoon. In another 2 hours, it would be evening. He looked at Tiger's Mane and asked, "How is it? How's the new army's night training? Can you ensure that the night's battle is normal?" "No problem." Tiger's Mane patted his chest and replied, "Our soldiers' meals are good and their nutrition can keep up. There are no longer any problems with night blindness. In addition to the recent assault training, although they still can't attack as freely as they can during the day, fighting at night and killing the enemy is no longer a problem." "Good, that's good. Tonight, there should be a chance for you to perform." Yang Chundong nodded happily. Now that everything was ready, all he had to do was wait for the sky to turn dark and he would charge into the battlefield and show off his skills. However, as the saying went, plans can't keep up with changes. Just as Yang Chundong led the army to the battlefield, a scout suddenly reported that a third force had suddenly charged into the battlefield. There were at least 10,000 cavalrymen and they were attacking Fan Yuhai together with Sahaba. Now, this famous general was forced to send another 10,000 cavalrymen to the battlefield to stabilize the situation. A third force? Who is it? This change was out of Yang Chundong's expectations. He didn't think that anyone would join the battle at this time. Before the outcome of the battle was decided, who would be so stupid to do something that would not benefit them? "I don't know, we're still investigating." The scout shook his head. He couldn't answer this question. "Investigate again." Yang Chundong's expression became much more serious. While he dismissed the scout, He also ordered the army to speed up some things. The sudden change had disrupted his plans. He had no choice but to arrive at the battlefield ahead of time. Only in this way could he deal with the changes by remaining unchanged. Fortunately, not long after, the scout brought back new information. The situation of the new force that had joined the battlefield had been clarified. It was Princess Tuoya. It's her. When he heard the news, Yang Qindong's expression quickly became as calm as before. He said, "She must have wanted to save her father. Unfortunately, Fan Yuhai's movements were too fast. She was still a step too late." This sixth young master, if this is the case, I'm afraid that Princess Tuoya will risk her life against the enemy. She only has 10,000 cavalrymen. If placed on the battlefield, she won't be of much use. Besides, with Sahaba's character, he will definitely treat her and her cavalrymen as cannon fodder. You see, beside him, she also considered the seriousness of the problem. That's right. Yang Qindong nodded his head. In his plan, Tuoya had nothing to do with this battle. This woman was prepared to be dealt with at the very end. However, since the battlefield had changed, he also had to change accordingly. How about this? Immediately order the recruits at the vanguard to speed up and rush to the battlefield as soon as possible. Tell them to do their best to protect the two wings of Princess Tuoya's army. Everything will be decided when the army arrives. Understood. Shibi nodded her head and urged her horse forward. At this moment, on the battlefield, as Yang Qindong expected, Sahaba had indeed treated this woman and the cavalrymen she brought with her as cannon fodder. When faced with Fan Yuhai's reinforcement of 10,000 cavalrymen, not only did he not increase the number of troops, he instead ordered the cavalrymen to retreat as much as possible, leaving the main battlefield to Tuoya and Fan Yuhai's cavalrymen. Sahaba's plan was naturally good. He would first allow these two opponents to fight. When the time came, regardless of which side was exhausted, it would be a good thing for him. Originally, this plan was left for the mercenaries. However, since they hadn't arrived yet, he decided to let Tuoya have a taste of this feeling first. On the battlefield, Tuoya and Na Risong led 10,000 cavalrymen and continuously rushed forward. Facing Fan Yuhai's cavalrymen, they didn't retreat a single step. The decisive battle was about to begin. Tuoya naturally had inquired about the situation long ago. Her initial thoughts could be said to be the same as Yang Qindong's. Both of them wanted to take advantage of this dogfight to make their move. If they could use this opportunity to rescue Sud Khan, that would naturally be the best thing to do. No matter how much she thought about it, she didn't expect Sud Khan to stop enduring at the final moment. Not only that, he even angered Fan Yuhai with his words and was shot to death on the battlefield. When Tuoya, who was also several tens of li away, learned of this misfortune, she almost fainted. Soon after, she led her army and rushed over without any regard for anything else. She wanted to kill Fan Yuhai with her own hands and avenge her father. Tuoya's appearance on the battlefield a step ahead had indeed caught both sides unprepared. It was just that one side was endlessly happy, while the other was cursing his bad luck. Brandishing her blade, she charged forward on the battlefield like a man. Tuoya, who had been practicing horsemanship since young and even had several masters, indeed had the side of a woman. After just a few charges, she had already lost 3 cavalrymen. However, she still didn't feel tired and continued to charge forward on her horse. Even if she wanted to kill, the number of cavalrymen under Fan Yuhai's command was too great. A total of 30,000 cavalrymen had been sent out. Even if there were some casualties, the remaining number wasn't something Tuoya could compare to. Coupled with Sahaba's intentional retreat, Tuoya's army was already very close to being surrounded. Princess, that son of Ab*Tch Sahaba, has retreated his army behind us. We are about to be surrounded. Na Risong brandished his blade and cut down another cavalryman. He then came to Tuoya's side and spoke with a slightly nervous tone. It's fine. In this matter, we have the same goal as Sahaba. As long as we are really in danger, he will definitely save us. He only wants to exhaust us, not eliminate us. So tell the brothers to just charge forward. Tuoya's face didn't reveal the slightest bit of fear. At this moment, the hatred for her father's death had already filled her heart. She even had the will to die and only thought of killing Fan Yuhai. She didn't care about anything else. Tuoya had already gone crazy. Na Risong could only shake his head and smile bitterly when facing such a princess. He then said to the bodyguards beside him, "No matter what, we have to protect the princess's safety. If it really doesn't work, we will kill our way out." Understood. The other bodyguards nodded in agreement. They then guarded Tuoya's left and right so that she wouldn't be disturbed and wouldn't have to worry about the safety of the flanks. Even though the protection was already very thorough, Tuoya's army still started to suffer large-scale casualties in the face of Fan Yuhai's army that was at least twice their size. When the military strength was inferior and the combat strength was equal, the side with more people would usually have the advantage. Charge! Just as Na Risong was about to consider whether or not they should retreat and forcefully leave with Princess Tuoya, another cavalry troop appeared not far away. Looking from afar, their uniform military green uniforms were like a green sea as they charged toward the center of the battlefield. The first batch of mercenary reinforcements finally appeared. The one leading the troop was the new army's division commander, Lu Zhua. All of the 6,100 men under him moved out and rushed over. The first lineup was the new army division. This was Yang Qindong's idea. He didn't want Zahaba to see through his real situation. The first army to be sent out was also the weakest. The new army division appeared. They didn't adopt the strategy of fighting at the tip of the arrow. Instead, they maintained a cavalry formation with 400 men in a battalion. They scattered the cavalry that Fan Yuhai had arranged on the periphery and rushed into the formation, arriving at Princess Tuoya's side. Then, the army slowed down and maintained contact with each other, protecting the princess's safety. It's the mercenaries. When he saw these special military uniforms, Na Risong recognized their identity. But what he didn't expect was that they actually came to protect the princess. When he saw that apart from the front, the left and right wings, as well as the back, there were organized mercenary cavalry troops protecting them, he couldn't help but let out a long sigh of relief. Naturally, Princess Tuoya also noticed the newcomers. At first, she still held her blade horizontally in front of her, assuming a defensive stance. From a certain perspective, she and Yang Qindong were still enemies. Who knew if they would attack her when they appeared? The battle situation changed once again. When Fan Yuhai saw this from the rear, his expression became even more unsightly. Originally, he was still very confident in dealing with Zahaba alone. Even if Princess Tuoya's 10,000 men were added, he still wouldn't be afraid. After all, this kind of allied army wasn't united, so there was a chance to break them down one by one. But now, the sudden appearance of the mercenary army made him feel an enormous pressure. Others didn't know about the strength of the mercenary army, but he had experienced it a long time ago. He was a witness to the destruction of Jiaoji. It was also at that time that he became an orphan and began to wander the world. Now that his old enemy was in front of him, Fan Yuhai really wanted to fight to his heart's content and avenge the enmity of that day. But in the end, reason won over impulse. He didn't have the confidence to fight 1 against 3. Pass down the order. Slowly retreat. Do your best to leave the battlefield and look for an opportunity to fight again. Chapter 870. Fan Yuhai was still able to see the big picture. When he realized that the situation wasn't good, he didn't waste words or think too much. All he did was to protect himself. When Sahaba finally saw the mercenary reinforcements appear, he couldn't help but be overjoyed. This was a chance to deal a heavy blow to the mercenaries. He quickly ordered his cavalry to retreat and watch the battle from the sidelines. Before he could give the order, he suddenly realized that Fan Yuhai's cavalry was retreating frantically, wanting to leave the battlefield. How could Sahaba let that happen? If he couldn't take down this powerful enemy today, it would be even more difficult to find such an opportunity in the future. Send 10,000 cavalry to the enemy's flanks. No matter what, we can't let them escape. The rest of you charge with me. Sahaba finally made the decision to charge with the entire army. In his eyes, the mercenaries and Tuoya were far less of a threat than Fan Yuhai. Sahaba's entire army moved out. The cavalry that had just retreated once again charged onto the battlefield. They attacked together with Tuoya and the mercenaries, chasing after Fan Yuhai's army for a long time. With the three parties joining forces, the pressure on Fan Yuhai's army, which originally had a slight advantage, increased greatly. Their military strength was inferior, and their morale was inferior. The control of the battlefield quickly changed hands. From the initial planned retreat, it became a real retreat. Hold on, hold on. Fan Yuhai saw the sudden change in the situation. Facing the pressure of the three parties, he knew that he would definitely lose if the battle continued. He had no choice but to shout in a futile attempt to stabilize the situation. At the same time, he called for Zhang Meng and Lu Duo to discuss the matter of breaking out of the encirclement. We can't. The battlefield is extremely disadvantageous for us. The morale of the soldiers has been shaken. If we continue fighting, we will definitely lose. We have to break out of the encirclement before they reach us. After calling for the two generals, Fan Yuhai immediately announced his decision. All right, we will break out of the encirclement. Although they were unwilling, they no longer had the right to choose. Fortunately, they had been prepared for this. The 5,000 cavalry that Fan Yuhai had with him from the beginning had been used as a backup. Now was the time to put them to use. Under the lead of the two generals, Zhang Meng and Lu Duo, the 5,000 cavalrymen once again began to flee. Once upon a time, Fan Yuhai had relied on these people to successfully slip away from the eyes of the mercenaries. When two small countries were destroyed and the alliance of three small countries was defeated, he was still unharmed. Unfortunately, this time they were facing the grassland cavalry that was determined to kill them. How could it be easy for them to escape? Since they were all cavalrymen, their advantage in speed was gone. Even though these 5,000 men were extremely elite, regardless of weapons and equipment, they were superior to ordinary cavalry. However, when faced with Tuoya, who was bent on vengeance, Lu Zhua, who had received his orders, and the Sahaba army who wanted to eliminate this calamity, they only managed to charge out for less than a li before they were entangled again. Moreover, the cavalry behind them was still increasing in number. General, please leave. Leave this place to me. At the crucial moment, Zhang Meng took the initiative to step forward. He led 3,000 cavalrymen to bring up the rear, blocking off the Mongol pursuers behind them. Take care of yourself. Lu Duo, let's go. After saying such a meaningless sentence, Fan Yuhai turned around and left. In his eyes, the life and death of others were never important. The most important thing was whether he could survive or not. Zhang Meng stayed behind, using his body to block off the three armies. He used his flesh and blood to build a great wall, fighting to the death without retreating an inch. He created layers of obstacles for the three armies, angering Tuoya so much that she screamed crazily. However, there was still no trace of him. Even though the recruits trained hard, most of the soldiers lacked battle experience. Facing Zhang Meng and his elites, they could not exert much strength. This scene was seen by Sahaba, who was following behind them. It was said that the mercenaries were strong, good at fighting, and had excellent equipment. Especially their commander, Duke Zhongdan, who was well versed in the art of war. It was difficult for him to lose. However, when he saw it for himself, Sahaba's heart was completely at ease. He did not know about the others, but at the very least, the strength of the mercenaries in front of him was very ordinary. There was still a large gap between their strength and his estimation. If that's the strength of the mercenaries, then it's not a big deal. Men, gather the prisoners on the battlefield. We need to strengthen ourselves. General, aren't we going to give chase? One of the Kiliarchs asked with a perplexed expression. Chase my ass. There's no chance now. It's more important to strengthen ourselves. Sahaba shook his head. Fan Yuhai's escape was already beyond his reach. Since that was the case, why not face reality and strengthen themselves first? With the order given, Sahaba's army stopped chasing and started to surround the Mongol cavalry that Fan Yuhai had left behind. With the pressure in front of him reduced, Zhang Meng had finally completed his mission and created enough time for Fan Yuhai to leave. However, after a bitter battle, he did not have many soldiers by his side. When Nadersong and Lu Zhuo joined forces to attack him, after several clashes, his chest was slashed by a sharp saber, revealing the white bones inside. Zhang Meng was seriously injured. Narisong and Lu Zhuo was struck while the iron was still hot. They attacked him continuously, adding new wounds to his left and right arms. Just when he didn't even have the strength to pick up his saber, Tuoya appeared in front of him. It was this Zhang Meng. Normally, he used the excuse of protecting her father's safety, but secretly spied on her. Tuoya had long hated this person. Since he couldn't catch up to Fan Yuhai, he might as well make an example out of this person. He raised the shiny saber high up and brought it down ruthlessly. Zhang Meng was dead. Fresh blood splattered on Princess Tuoya's face. It was warm, but it also carried her tears. With Zhang Meng dead, the resistance of Fan Yuhai's troops immediately fell into disorder. Other than half of the cavalry who escaped when they saw that the situation was not good, the rest were surrounded by Sahaba's troops and were forced to surrender. At this moment, Sahaba was no longer satisfied with these ordinary captives. He set his sights on Princess Tuoya. Su Dening became the Khan of the Mongol tribe in the north of the desert and was respected by the people. Very few people rebelled. The biggest reason was that he had the blood of the Golden family flowing in his body, which was why he was recognized by everyone. If Sahaba wanted to lead these Mongol tribes, there were only two paths he could take. The first was to kill these tribes until they trembled in fear, and then use his powerful strength to force them to surrender. However, in this way, the Mongol tribes in the north of the desert would be greatly weakened. Once other great powers got involved, it would be difficult to resist the enemy. The second path was much more peaceful. He only needed to marry Tuoya and let their child become a Khan. In this way, it was equivalent to having the power of the bloodline. Naturally, he would have a powerful rallying power. How could Sahaba not be moved when he could get a beauty and also obtain great power? Now that the situation was settled, it was the best time to capture Tuoya. Therefore, his army surrounded her. Because Lu Zhuo was too close to them, he was unfortunately surrounded as well. Haha, little sister Tuoya. Now that the situation is settled, the murderer of the Khan has been beaten to death by my army. Your great hatred can be considered avenged. Thinking about it, a girl like you must have had a hard time. Why don't you come to my tent and take a short rest? Sahaba continued to flatter himself, shamelessly speaking. How could Tuoya not see through Sahaba's little tricks? If it was said that she originally had a good impression of this childhood friend of hers, it had disappeared in the battle just now. He actually allowed her and Fan Yuhai to fight to the death. Not only did he not help, he even ordered his troops to retreat. If it wasn't for the timely appearance of the mercenaries, most of the cavalrymen she brought with her would have been killed. At that time, would he still be so courteous with her? Many thanks for General Sahaba's good intentions, but my father's blood hatred has not been completely avenged. Fan Yuhai is still fleeing and I still have to lead the army to chase after him. I will come back to thank the general when I have the chance in the future. Tuoya threw down these words and prepared to leave. Wait! Seeing that Tuoya had actually rejected him, it was clear that she refused a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. Sahaba finally revealed his true colors. Little sister Tuoya, I will immediately send people to handle the matter of chasing after him. I believe that it won't be long before there is news. Now please come to my tent to rest. Men, please come with the princess. Who dares? Since the soft approach didn't work, he had to use the hard approach. Without waiting for the cavalry to move, Narisong shouted and came to Tuoya's side, standing with his sword. After this battle, although their strength had been damaged, they still had more than 6,000 cavalry. It was enough to kill a bloody path out. Oh, little sister Tuoya, must you reject my good intentions? Don't you know who has the final say now? Do you really think that you can break out of this general's encirclement with just your cavalry? Or do you think that these people are willing to give their lives for you? Sahaba said in a mocking tone. His gaze then landed on the cavalry that followed Tuoya. I don't care what you have done before, but now I want to take the princess as my wife. As long as you don't stop me, no one will do anything to you. Think about it, you are just ordinary soldiers. Is it worth it to give up your lives for a fallen person? Suda Khan is already dead. Who can see your loyalty? Sahaba did indeed have some ability. He knew the importance of people's hearts. At this moment, when he suddenly said such words, the situation suddenly changed. The cavalry that was brought by Tuoya and Narasong all had complicated expressions. Chapter 871. Among them, many of them were willing to follow them because of the hope in their hearts. Once they rescued Suda Khan, they would make a great contribution and obtain countless benefits. But now, knowing that Suda Khan was dead, and more importantly Sahaba, who had the upper hand, could decide their life and death. If they continued to fight, why would they die? At least half of the 7,000 cavalrymen were persuaded by Sahaba. When Na Raizong saw this change, he sighed. If this was really the case, not to mention threatening Sahaba, it was hard to say if they could even escape. In contrast, Tuoya's expression was normal. Perhaps the blow from her father's death was too heavy that she lost her will to live, or perhaps she had a better understanding of the human heart. Facing the cavalryman who suddenly disobeyed her orders, she did not show much panic. Instead, she turned her wrist and placed the saber on her neck. Sahaba, don't you want to marry me to control the entire tribe? Fine, if I die in front of you, what else can you do? You can't. Seeing Tuoya place the saber on her neck, Na Raizong cried out in alarm. Sahaba's expression was similarly frightening. He did not expect Tuoya to be so unyielding. Even if she died, she would not marry him. For a moment, he was in a dilemma. All right, nothing must happen to the princess, and nothing will happen to her. This is the war god's request. Lu Zhua, who had seen everything, could not help but shake his head after seeing the change in the situation. Then, he finally opened his mouth to speak. When Lu Zhua spoke, Sahaba, who did not know what to do, immediately found an outlet to vent. He looked at Lu Zhua and reprimanded, "What are you trying to do? We're God." The war god said he wanted to form an alliance with us and sent 6,000 of you. Now that we have won the battle, you still want to give orders? Let me tell you, this is wishful thinking. This is the prairie, not the great Ming dynasty. Facing Sahaba's rebuke, Lu Zhua's face didn't turn red. His heart didn't beat fast, and his expression was normal. No matter where it is, the word of the war god is valid. Anyone who wants to challenge his authority is the enemy of all of us mercenaries. Only after he finished speaking did the 6,000 new recruits he brought raise their cavalry swords. It was as if they were going to fight to the death with whoever dared to step forward. Compared to the cavalry brought by Tuoya, the movements of the 6,000 mercenary recruits were uniform, and their thoughts were also highly unified. This scene made Na Raizong extremely envious. He had to admit that, in terms of leading an army, the war god was indeed more capable than ordinary people. Fan Yuhai abandoned the 3,000 cavalrymen and Zhang Meng. Under Lu Duo's protection, he led the 2,000 cavalrymen away. At this moment, the sky was close to dusk, and it was about to get dark. At that time, as long as they didn't light a fire, they could use the night to escape far away without being discovered by anyone. Humph! Ignorant grassland people, one day I will return. At that time, I will kill all of your men and only leave your women for us to reproduce. At that time, you will regret it for the rest of your lives. Fan Yuhai said angrily. Today's defeat not only made his several months of hard work go to waste, but he also lost 3,000 cavalrymen and a valiant general. It was not worth it. Fortunately, he was able to escape in the end. Where there is life, there is hope. With Fan Yuhai's intelligence, it wouldn't be long before he could rise again. Report, there are cavalrymen in front. Report, there are enemies in the left wing. Report, there are enemies in the right wing. Report, there are enemies behind us as well. The scouts' shouts interrupted Fan Yuhai's reverie. At this moment, his expression became extremely tense. If there were only enemies in one direction, it might be a coincidence. But now, there were enemies in several directions and he was surrounded. This was not a coincidence, but someone's intention. He had clearly charged out of the encirclement, so how could there be enemies here? Fan Yuhai was puzzled, but soon his eyes widened as if he had thought of something. The great Ming's Duke of Loyalty. At this moment, only Yang Chendong could appear outside the battlefield and meticulously design such a complete encirclement in such a short time. What was he trying to do? Was he trying to kill them all? When he thought of how he had caused trouble for others many times, and now that retribution had finally come, Fan Yuhai was no longer as calm and composed as before. He became extremely nervous. Quick, see where there are the least number of enemies. We have to rush out as soon as possible. He still had 2,000 cavalrymen under him, and this was where his confidence came from. As long as they rushed out in time, they could definitely kill their way out. Once they escaped, the vast grassland would be like birds flying in the sky. The scouts were faced with questions, but they could not answer. They were too far away and could only see the shadows of the cavalrymen. As for which direction had the least number of enemies, they really did not know. After glaring angrily at the scouts, Fan Yuhai quickly made a decision to head west. That was the deepest part of the grassland, and it was also the most likely place to avoid all enemies. Once the direction was confirmed, he immediately gave the order, and the 2,000 cavalrymen followed him to the west. Several li away, the direction of Fan Yuhai's army was quickly confirmed and reported to Yang Chendong. They're heading west? Immediately send a light cavalry regiment to chase after them and stick to them. Commander Xiaofeng, everything depends on your ferocious tiger regiment. Come, give each of them 2 war horses. No matter what, this time you must leave Fan Yuhai's life behind. Fan Yuhai had repeatedly appeared and caused endless trouble, and Yang Chendong had already lost patience with him. What he needed to do now was to seize this opportunity to prevent future troubles. As for Division Commander Lu Zhua, it was now almost dark, and there would probably be no battle. Moreover, it would not be too late to go over after he had settled the matters here. On the battlefield, Lu Zhua's sudden support for Tuoya had indeed caught Sahaba unprepared. Considering that it was almost dark, he finally gave up on the idea of immediately starting the battle. In the dark, no one could see each other clearly. If Tuoya were to escape, then the gains would not make up for the losses. Men, set up camp and surround this place. Don't let a single person leave. Of course, it's a different story if there are people who surrender. Sahaba glanced at Tuoya again and revealed the laughter of a victor. Let's take advantage of the night and kill our way out. Princess Tuoya gripped the blade at her neck and spoke with a rather heroic spirit. No. Without waiting for Na Raizong to nod, Division Commander Lu Zhu suddenly shook his head. Although he did not know why the 6th young master had yet to appear with his army, he firmly believed that he would not be abandoned. He only needed to wait a little longer. Once the army arrived, all dangers would be resolved. Why? Tuoya asked with a face full of dissatisfaction. Let's wait a little longer. The war god's army is already not far from here. The princess can't bear to see the 3,000 brothers following you die, right? Lu Zhu knew that it was useless to say more, so he used the cavalry brothers who were still willing to stay behind as a guarantee. Of the 7,000 cavalry soldiers who were still alive, more than half had already been persuaded by Sahaba and left with him. However, there were still 3,000 brothers who stayed behind. Just based on this, the burden on Tuoya's shoulders was still very heavy. How about we wait a little longer? Na Raizong suggested after muttering to himself for a while. He was not afraid of death. Since he chose to stay behind, he had already disregarded life and death. However, he did not want to die so muddle-headedly like this. If that happened, even if he went to see Suda Khan, he would not have the face to explain himself. Na Raizong relented. Tuoya nodded after a moment of hesitation. All right, then let's wait a night. If Sahaba uses force, I will not give him any chance even if I have to commit suicide. The princess's unyielding character is admirable. Lu Zhu cupped his fists and replied. Then, he arranged for the soldiers to light up a bonfire. This would not only provide warmth in the night, but also illuminate the surroundings to prevent a night attack. Every move was very careful. Sahaba did not mind. He still had many things to do. He had recruited 20,000 people in one go. What he needed to do now was to pacify the hearts of these people. Once this matter was settled, when dawn came, he would be able to command these 40,000 men to launch an attack. At that time, the entire Mongol tribe of the Gobi Desert would only respect him. Everyone had their own wishful thinking, and the cavalry formation that had been fighting for the whole day became quiet. Both sides were intentionally restraining themselves, waiting for the arrival of dawn. On the grassland less than 100 li away, at this moment, Fan Yuhai was surrounded by the mercenary cavalry. The speed of the light cavalry was very fast. After figuring out the direction of their escape, they quickly caught up. Relying on the advantage of speed, they quickly entangled Fan Yuhai's troops. The sound of arrows piercing through the air could be heard constantly, greatly slowing down the speed of their advance. Helpless, Fan Yuhai could only divide his troops again. He arranged for Lu Duo to lead 1,000 men to charge out under his banner, attracting the attention of the mercenaries. Facing Fan Yuhai's military order, Lu Duo's eyes revealed a look of disbelief. "General, if we combine our forces, we may still be able to fight the enemy. If we split up, I'm afraid we won't even have the strength to fight." Thinking about how Zhang Meng had stayed behind because he had split up his troops, and now that he was probably dead, he did not think highly of splitting up his troops. At worst, he would just stay behind and fight the enemy. Killing one was enough to break even, killing two was still a gain. We can't. If we split up, there is still a chance. If we combine our forces, there will be no chance at all. Lu Duo, are you not going to listen to this general's orders? Didn't you say that your life is mine? Even if you die, you will ensure my safety? At this moment, Fan Yuhai finally revealed his true nature. Chapter 872. Okay, I'll split up. Lu Duo knew that from this moment on, his friendship with Fan Yuhai was completely broken. It was only now that he realized how selfish the person he followed was. He had always been a chess piece in the other person's eyes. Just like that, the 2,000 cavalry were split into two groups. Lu Duo took his people and left under his banner. It did attract a portion of the pursuers, but there were still people chasing after him. Clearly, the strategy of splitting up the troops was just like what Lu Duo said. It was not practical. At least, it was not practical when facing Yang Chendong. Fan Yuhai knew that the biggest crisis of his life was coming. He kept trying to split up 300 men to block the light cavalry regiment's pursuit while thinking of a way to escape into the distance. However, the light cavalry regiment's advantage was that they were fast. It was not something that could be easily shaken off. Ma Xiangshan's light cavalry regiment did not have the intention to fight Fan Yuhai's troops head-on. They just followed from a distance and attacked with bows and arrows. Once they found that the enemy had split up, they would immediately send people to encircle and annihilate them. This kind of divide-and-conquer tactic was very troublesome. The more they split up, the more they would lose. It didn't take long for the 300 cavalry soldiers to be annihilated by the mercenary light cavalry regiment. When they caught up again, Fan Yuhai didn't dare to split his forces. He only rushed towards the west, hoping to find some favorable terrain that could allow him to escape. Person's luck could not be so good forever. Fan Yuhai, who had escaped many times, finally encountered a hard rock. In the early hours of the morning, a large army blocked his path. It was the fierce Tiger Regiment that came here in a roundabout way on Yang Chendong's orders. Commander Xiaofeng had been waiting here for a long time. Finally, the target appeared. Ever since he came to the grasslands, Xiaofeng had yet to show his skills. This time, he held back all his strength. With a loud shout, 1,000 guns fired. The bullets drew a red line across the night sky. Fan Yuhai's troops that were coming from the front were immediately hit hard. Even Fan Yuhai, who was running at the very front, did not fare well. A bullet coincidentally hit his mount, throwing him off his warhorse. "Blow the charge horn," Although he couldn't see the situation in front of him clearly due to the distance and the darkness, there was no doubt that the bullet had severely injured the enemy. Immediately, Xiao Feng gave the order to charge. The 3,200 men of the ferocious Tiger Regiment moved out and arrived at the battlefield very quickly. Another round of gunfire rang out, but the enemy cavalry who refused to submit were all killed. Only about 400 of them were left, either injured or scared out of their wits. They knelt on the ground and surrendered. Capture them all. Let's see if Fan Yuhai is dead or not. Xiao Feng commanded the soldiers to quickly enter the battlefield with torches in hand, beginning to clean up the situation. He's here. Fan Yuhai fainted from the fall. Some of the faster warriors found Fan Yuhai, who had fallen off from his horse, lying on the ground weakly. The cunning Fan Yuhai was cunning. The war horse that was traveling at high speed suddenly fell down, causing him, who was on the back of the horse, to be seriously injured. Ha! Good. Let's capture him and bring him away. Xiao Feng's face lit up with joy as he finally caught Fan Yuhai. At this time, the light cavalry regiment also rushed over. While Ma Xiangshan went forward to check the situation, he reported to Xiao Feng the situation of the other enemy cavalry. That Lu Duo's luck isn't too good. He met the heavy cavalry regiment. This time he'll be in trouble. Oh, that's really bad luck. When Xiao Feng heard that the heavy cavalry regiment had moved out, and they just happened to meet Lu Duo, he immediately gave up on the idea of going to support them. In the new army, if the heavy cavalry regiment said they were first in terms of cavalry combat ability, naturally no one would dare to say they were second. The situation over there was basically stable. Just as the two regiment commanders expected, Lu Duo was quickly killed when he met the heavy cavalry regiment. This was not to say that he was incompetent. It was just that the combat strength of the heavy cavalry regiment was too ferocious. Their heavy equipment was almost impenetrable, and their 3-meter-long broadswords were like Buddha killing Buddha. In just 3 rounds, more than half of the 1,000 cavalrymen were lost. As the main general, Lu Duo was even beaten off his horse under the joint attack of 4 heavy cavalrymen and became a captive. At this point, the escaping Fan Yuhai's troops were all killed and captured. The situation was set. For hours later, the army gathered beside Yang Qindong. Looking at the sky that was about to brighten, the 6th young master said, "There's still a big battle waiting for us brothers. Everyone work hard." Haha, as long as there's a battle to fight, even if we don't sleep for a few days, it's not a problem. Tiger's mane laughed out loud. His words immediately attracted many voices of agreement. Following which, the main force of the new army and the fierce Tiger Regiment all gathered together and rushed towards the main battlefield. On the horizon, a red sun slowly rose. After a busy night, the harvest was not small. After talking to countless surrendered generals, Sahaba also walked out of the main tent. At this moment, he was very satisfied and had great ambitions for the future. In a single night, most of the surrendered generals recognized him as the future Khan of the Northeast Mongolian tribe. Although there were some people who were reserved and waiting for the best offer, they still didn't express their opinions. However, Sahaba was extremely confident. As long as he eliminated the mercenaries and Na Risong's troops today and married Princess Tuoya, it would be equivalent to having a righteous identity. At that time, no one would be able to stop him from ascending to the position of Khan. Pass down the order. Light a fire and cook. Let the brothers eat their fill first, then we can kill. Ha ha ha. Sahaba, who was in a good mood, laughed loudly. He had the appearance of an unparalleled hero. The army began to cook. The fragrance of the dishes filled the air. There were even people who drank wine in advance to celebrate. It was extraordinarily lively. In comparison, Tuoya, Luzhua, and Na Risong, who were surrounded in the center, became much quieter. Being surrounded in the center, there was no way for them to use their cooking utensils. They could only eat the dry rations they brought with them. This made the expressions of the remaining 3,000 Mongolian cavalrymen not look very good. However, the new recruits who were also eating dry rations did not show any signs of falling morale. They silently gnawed on their dry rations and looked at the enemy cavalry around them. Perhaps they knew that it wouldn't be long before the sixth young master appeared with the main force. At that time, it would be time for them to hold their heads high. At that time, even if they ate large pieces of meat and drank large bowls of wine, it wouldn't be a problem. Tuoya was also eating in small bites. Her gaze constantly moved between the two armies. Narration, who was at the side, moved in front of her. Princess, the war god is indeed good at leading troops. Look, their soldiers' morale is not affected in the slightest by the environment. It is truly amazing. It is very amazing. Tuoya sighed from the bottom of her heart. That war god was the person she admired for a long time. Unfortunately, fate made fools of people. Everyone became enemies, and it would be difficult for them to become friends. As if he wanted to use this method to affect the morale of Tuoya's army, Sahaba was not in a hurry to attack. His breakfast actually lasted for a full 2 hours. He originally wanted to continue and subdue the enemy without fighting. However, a sudden news broke his good mood. A scout suddenly reported that the supply base at the rear had been occupied by the mercenaries. The remaining 2,000 cavalrymen were either killed or captured. In short, it had nothing to do with him anymore. Before the army moved, the supplies would move first. Without supplies, who would be willing to follow you and work for you? Sahaba, who heard the news, was naturally furious. In a fit of anger, he threw the mutton in his hand to the ground and pulled out his cavalry sword. He roared loudly, "The mercenaries are too much. Since that is the case, don't blame me for being merciless. Men, gather the army and prepare to attack." Sahaba was finally enraged. The army also began to gather and prepare to attack. Tuoya and the rest also gripped their cavalry swords tightly, ready to fight to the death at any time. Just as both sides were preparing for the attack, a bloody battle was unavoidable. In the distant grassland, wind and thunder suddenly rumbled. Looking from afar, a sea of military green was rapidly approaching. Not good, it's the mercenaries. The sharp-eyed scouts finally discovered the enemy. As they sprinted madly towards the camp, they shouted loudly. This news instantly spread throughout the entire camp. Those tribal generals who were prepared to assist Sahaba immediately lowered their sabers once again. Before seeing the situation clearly, they would not casually make a move. They only had one chance to gamble, so they would not casually make a move. Bastards, who told you to shout? Sahaba saw that the army was moving because of the scouts' shouts. While he angrily reprimanded the scouts for spreading the news, he also hurriedly mobilized his cavalrymen. He had already seen the strength of the mercenaries before. There was nothing to be afraid of. As long as he could defeat the mercenaries in this battle, the initiative would be in his hands again. 25,000 cavalrymen were assembled one by one. They were fully armed and ready to fight back against the mercenaries. Commander Lu Zhua, who was surrounded in the middle of the battlefield, sharply discovered an opportunity. He first looked at Tuoya and Naderasong and said, "Princess, General Naderasong, now is the time for us to fight back. While no one is paying attention to us, we will send our troops to Sahaba's central army. As long as we break the formation there, they will definitely lose." Okay. Tuoya and Naderasong both replied in unison. From a certain perspective, if it wasn't for Sahaba's coercion, Sud Khan might not have died. Just based on this point alone, they would do their best. Sahaba continuously arranged his cavalrymen in front of him. With 25,000 cavalrymen in his hand, his heroic spirit rose. Naturally, he was not afraid of the mercenaries' charge. On the contrary, he wanted to use this battle to show everyone who was the real hero of the grassland. Kill. While he was immensely pleased with himself, suddenly a wave of battle cries came from the side. Tuoya and Lu Zhua's troops had joined forces. Close to 10,000 cavalrymen suddenly charged over. They were already less than 3 li away from Sahaba's central army. Chapter 873. Quick! Stop them! Stop them! Seeing this sudden attack, Sahaba turned pale with fright. He was only thinking about dealing with the mercenaries coming from afar, and had forgotten about the 10,000 enemies that he had already regarded as meat in his bowl. Now, he could only watch as the mercenaries came closer and closer. Along the way, the cavalrymen who had surrendered to him last night actually did not stop them. Instead, they took the initiative to open up a path. They were clearly here to watch the show. Knowing that he had miscalculated, Sahaba was shocked. At the same time, he hurriedly moved the army to block Tuoya's troops. This time, he had made another bad move. Originally, the main army's cavalrymen had already been arranged. With the advantage in numbers, even if the mercenaries rushed over, it would be impossible for them to break through the defensive line in a short period of time. However, with this move, the front army's formation was thrown into chaos, giving the attacking mercenaries an opportunity to attack. The commander of the new Tatar division, Suhi, who was charging at the front, seized this opportunity and launched a continuous and fierce attack with the tip of the arrows. He had never seen such a formation before and had no experience in dealing with it. In addition, the front army was originally on the move. In the chaos, they were forced to retreat again and again. The cavalry formation formed by more than 12,000 men was thrown into chaos and even collapsed. The cavalrymen in the front began to lose. Tuoya and the others from the side also charged forward. The distance between the two sides was less than a li. Moreover, from the looks of it, no one could stop the enemy's charge. When the situation was far from good, Sahaba made an even more foolish decision. He turned around and fled. For the sake of preserving his own life, he completely disregarded the 20,000-plus soldiers and 20,000 surrendered soldiers. He turned around and left the battlefield with only a few dozen of his personal guards. With the protection of the arrow-tip formation, Division Commander He quickly broke through the formation and rushed to the front. He saw the scene of someone fleeing. At this moment, General Narisong's shout rang out. Sahaba has already fled. Who are the rest of you still fighting for? Why don't you dismount and surrender? You can still live. Narisong's shout reverberated throughout the battlefield, causing the already chaotic enemy troops to become even more chaotic. Many of the enemy cavalry had already stopped their actions of urging their war horses, instead standing in place and hesitating. Suhi noticed the change in the situation and immediately came up with a plan. He got the soldiers around him to shout along with him. Sebaha's grain collection area has been occupied by the mercenaries. He's finished. Any cavalry who still wants to follow him will face the situation of starvation. Everyone make your own choice. The cavalrymen, who were already at a loss, quickly urged their war horses to stop when they heard that there was no more rations. They stood there, not knowing what to do. A huge battle that was supposed to happen was stopped just like that. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the ferocious Tiger Regiment was the first to arrive. Countless black muzzles were raised, and anyone who made any strange movements was killed without mercy. In a short period of time, at least 100 riders were killed. The situation on the battlefield became extremely quiet. Although the guns were limited, and it was impossible to kill more than 40,000 cavalrymen present, no one wanted to be the first to stand out. An unimaginable scene appeared. The battlefield was so quiet that it was frightening. Yang Chendong was riding on the white dragon horse, waiting for the bloody battle ahead. Yang Si, who was holding a telescope to observe the situation on the battlefield, suddenly shouted, "Young master, a few dozen riders have escaped. It looks like they want to enter the depths of Mongolia." Escape? Without orders, who can escape? Tiger's mane, let Ma Xiangshan go and capture them all. Yang Chendong snorted. If too many enemies escaped, reaching tens of thousands, he would be unable to do anything. But only a few dozen riders escaped. That was absolutely not allowed. Ma Xiangshan's light cavalry once again jumped into the formation and chased after the escaping Sahaba. Yang Chendong did not pay attention to this small matter. Instead, he looked at the battlefield that suddenly became quiet and frowned. Then he said with relief, "It looks like the situation on the battlefield is better than we expected. Haha, since that is the case, let's set out and meet these grassland heroes." The situation of this battle far exceeded Yang Chendong's expectations. It was originally a bloody battle, and Yang Qindong was even prepared to lose 2 of his forces. Only when he arrived on the battlefield did he realize that the situation was far better than he expected. Pass down the order. Before Sahaba is captured, no one is to act rashly. Otherwise, the war god's guns will not have eyes. Knowing that at this moment, he had to use a thunderous and forceful method to intimidate everyone. Yang Qindong immediately said without any trace of politeness. He left behind some to pacify everyone. He also made it clear that as long as they did not act rashly, no matter what the final result was, the mercenaries would not act against them. This was the war god's promise. After doing all this, he walked to Tuoya's side. "Princess, if you trust my character, can you come with me over there to talk?" Seeing Yang Qindong again, and not the person who lazily sunbathed by the stream, Tuoya's heart could be said to be filled with all sorts of emotions. "Okay, I trust the war god's character. Please lead the way." Nari Song was not at ease with the princess's safety. He brought a dozen elite soldiers to follow behind Yang Qindong and came to the new army reconnaissance camp 2 li away. There were already several large tents set up here. Seeing Yang Qindong come, Battalion Commander Ding Shan came early to greet him. "Battalion Commander Ding, bring Fan Yuhai and his brothers over," Yang Qindong said, then smiled at the shocked Tuoya and gestured for her to come over. Fan Yuhai was captured by the war god? Tuoya only came back to her senses after a long while, her face full of disbelief. "That's right, it was also my luck. He just happened to run into me when he was escaping, so I took care of him in passing. To tell the truth, although I was enemies with Khagan Suda before, I also respected the Khagan's character. Even if there were casualties in a battle, it was inevitable. However, a despicable person like Fan Yuhai, who used house arrest and threats, was truly shameful. For such a despicable person, I would be more than happy to kill him. However, considering that the princess might hate him even more, I resisted the urge to act and let him stay. Now that he is there, if you want to kill him or cut him up, the princess can do whatever you want." Yang Qindong spoke righteously. At this moment, his body was shining brightly, as if it could make people forget that the reason Fan Yuhai had placed Suda under house arrest was because he had sent people to behead him. Speaking of which, Yang Qindong really didn't need to feel guilty. As an enemy on the battlefield, it was always either you die or I die. Not to mention, it was basically Khagan Suda who had provoked him several times. He had only retaliated normally and suffered a gunshot wound. That was because his skills weren't as good as Khagan Suda, so he couldn't blame Yang Qindong. Tuoya also knew this, so in her heart, she had never blamed Yang Qindong. Now that she heard that he had brought her father's murderer to her, she immediately bowed and said gratefully, "Thank you, war god. Since that's the case, I want to kill this person. Can I?" "Of course," I just said, "if you want to kill or cut him up, please do so." Yang Qindong nodded without hesitation. For someone like Fan Yuhai, even if Tuoya didn't kill him, he would still kill him. Since that was the case, who did it, what did it matter? Under everyone's gaze, the tied-up Fan Yuhai was brought in front of Tuoya. Because he had fallen off the back of the horse, his face was covered in dirt, and there was a bloody scratch on his face. When people looked at him, he no longer had the appearance of being able to predict everything. Instead, he appeared to be in a very sorry state. Fan Yuhai, who was brought out by 2 mercenaries, raised his head and saw Tuoya walking towards him with a curved horse. His usually calm face finally revealed a look of fear. He, who had been silent all this time, finally shouted at this moment, "Duke of Loyalty, you can't do this to me. I'm very smart, and you know my ability. How about this, let me go, and I'll be willing to serve you forever." From the moment he was captured until now, Fan Yuhai had been very calm. It was all because he was confident in his ability. Just like when he appeared in front of Khagan Suda knew that he was ambitious, but still put him in an important position. In the end, this was the personality of the strong. They always believed that they could control everything, that they were the most powerful people in the world, that there was nothing they couldn't solve. Because of this, Fan Yuhai believed that Yang Qindong wouldn't kill him. Instead, he might put him in an important position. With the mentality of waiting for the best offer, Fan Yuhai appeared extremely calm. He was waiting for the other party to discuss conditions with him, waiting for the other party to haggle. However, when he saw Princess Tuoya appear, he knew that things didn't develop as he imagined. Instead, there was a huge problem. Although he didn't know where the problem came from, he thought that he would definitely be useful. As long as he lowered his head, Yang Chundong shouldn't do anything to him. At this moment, Fan Yuhai no longer had the demeanor of a famous general. Perhaps he knew that if he didn't work hard, he might lose his life. At this moment he was shouting crazily, as if he was afraid that Yang Chundong wouldn't hear him. Yang Chundong naturally heard him. At this moment, he was standing beside Lu Duo and the other cavalrymen who had followed Fan Yuhai for many years. He then looked at these cavalrymen with a tone that carried hidden ridicule, saying, "All of you listen carefully. This is the general you've always been loyal to. This is the leader who is omnipotent and omniscient in your eyes. To be honest, he really isn't all that great. At the very least, when facing death, his performance isn't even as good as some soldiers with unyielding characters." Yang Chundong shook his head. At this moment, he was extremely disappointed in Fan Yuhai. Not long ago, he had still treated this person as a dish. However, everything that happened now proved that he had indeed overestimated this opponent. At the very least, when facing death, Fan Yuhai didn't display the backbone that he should have. So what if this kind of person was capable? There would still be a day when he would betray him out of fear of death. You're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.